Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order. I'm going to call the meeting to order. With us this evening, so you know, is Michael Gilbert from the MASC. Tracy had another meeting that she had to attend, and they're still short a couple of staff members due to illness. So Michael is actually retired from the MASC, but he agreed to come out and help this evening here. So up first at 5:30 is Matt Erhenworth, and then followed around 7 o'clock by Dr. Provost. So again, same scenario. If we finish early and then Dr. Provost is here, I left a 15-minute slot for a break. So again, we'll let that occur. And then after that, in between his interview and then deliberation, we can hit the sustenance table again.
Good evening, everyone.
Before I call for the Pledge of Allegiance, I just wanted to introduce the committee to Matt Erhenworth, the Assistant Superintendent from Blackstone Millville. I practiced that all day because I kept saying Millbury before. All right, if you would join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So what we'll do this evening is the committee has a set of questions that they will go around the table and ask their questions. But first, feel free to give an opening statement and a little bit about yourself or whatever you want to include.
Sure. So I am thrilled to be here as a finalist for this position. I did a lot of research before I decided to apply, and I definitely think that the skill set and experience that I bring to the table are what this district will need to move forward in the future. And I think that I can certainly support the work that is going on and help drive things forward. And I'm sure that the questions are going to be taking a lot of time, so I won't speak anymore for right now.
And also, just so you know, it's difficult because we're at the mark, so you could.
Talk a little louder, sorry. Yep.
That's my point.
Yep. Usually people don't have to tell me to talk louder.
Yeah, I've heard that about myself too, but okay, first up, Mitch.
Thank you. I'm Mitch Brodsky. Welcome.
You're also muted.
Thank you.
I need a sign.
There we go. Again, I'm Mitch Grotsky, and welcome. We're glad you're here. Given the stress in the lives of young people today and the social, academic, and even financial pressures they face, how can educators in general and a superintendent in particular have an impact on the emotional well-being of students?
So it all starts at the classroom level. You mentioned the educators. The educators need to get to know their students. They need to understand what they're going through. They need to learn about their families, what's happening with them. They need to pick up on what those stressors might be so that they can better work with the students and the families. And then additionally, that allows them to direct the student and or families to ancillary services that they may need. You know, the student may need counseling, or they may need some support with food services, getting free and reduced lunch. So it's imperative that the teachers are working very closely in getting to know their students. They should also, not every teacher, but at least at the building level, there should be a comprehensive social emotional learning curriculum, which will help address the needs of the students in the entire building. From a superintendent perspective, I think you need to put the people, programs, and partnerships in place to make sure that you're supporting all of the work that has to happen. So for example, at BMR, we just introduced a 12-month social worker who follows wraparound services and communicates constantly with our administrative team. I know that there's a similar position in Athol-Royalston. Next year, we're going to be introducing a community resource center so that we have a centralized place for families to go to when they're looking for services. Another thing that we've done is we just created a system, Handle with Care. So we have a form, actually, I say a system. It's relatively simple, but it's effective. So we have a form that alerts certain individuals on the administrative team. Anytime there's a student in crisis over the weekend or on the evenings or whenever, people will know to access this form and explain a little bit about what's happening with those students. And then the form will alert myself and our central office administrative team so that we can reach out to the teachers and let them know. Again, they won't have all of the information that we might have, but they need to be aware that some child is coming into their classroom that experienced trauma potentially, or was going through a crisis. You know, we have families who have domestic violence and police are showing up at their homes. And it's helpful for the staff to know about those things. Additionally, it's the responsibility of the superintendent to make sure that comprehensive curriculum for SEL is in place. I know that this district follows the CASEL model and the 5 tenets of CASEL. BMR also follows that. I know you guys use curriculum Character Strong. We use Choose Love. So we've been doing very similar work in those areas, and we want to make sure that we're continuing that work. With respect to the superintendency here in Athol-Royalston, I can say you already have a tremendous partnership with Haywood Behavioral Health Center, and I've had some great communication already with Maureen Donovan. And if I were to be entering in and taking on this work, part of that would definitely be to get under the hood of the programs that already exist, see if and how we could improve them, and see how we could possibly expand the partnership.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The next question is for Carla, and she was unable to attend tonight. Mitch, do
That's
you want to read hers?
Oh, sure. Thank you. What does high quality learning look like? And how would you support teachers in providing that type of learning? How does that incorporate the various facets, facilities, nutrition, technology of the district?
I'm going to try to address all 3 parts of that. So high quality learning to me, looks like students that are actively engaged in the classroom. They're interacting with one another. They're getting their hands onto resources and they're participating and they seem happy. Quality learning involves teachers asking the right questions to drive higher order thinking. I know that there's a focus on that in Athol-Royalston through the coaching cycles that have taken place, as well as meaningful conversation between the students. High quality learning to me, if I walk into a classroom, I should also see evidence of differentiation for the students and potential scaffolding for students of special needs, so that I know that the curriculum that's being implemented has provided equitable access to all of the students in that building. From the superintendent's perspective, it's our job to put the systems and structures in to maintain that. So I would say, first, we need to make sure that the curricula has the appropriate resources and materials to allow teachers to differentiate their instruction and provide that scaffolding for the students that need it. And we also need to make sure that there's training afforded to the teachers in order to use those materials properly. In addition to just the curriculum experience, the superintendent should be making sure that professional development is taking place in the district. We have building-based instructional leadership teams. I believe those exist, at least in some capacity, in Athol-Royalston as well. And I think it's those building-based instructional leadership teams that should be identifying the opportunities for professional development, whether they're contracted in or they're opportunities that the staff are creating themselves and then implementing for the rest of the staff. So there's the, I apologize.
Would you like to hear that again?
Yeah, please.
What does high quality learning look like, and how would you support teachers in providing that type of learning? How does that incorporate the various facets, facilities, nutrition, technology of the district?
Thank you. I lost my train of thought. I knew I had another piece regarding the systems for the superintendent. The other thing that the superintendent can do, which is outside of the classroom, is make sure that the coaches are able to get into the classrooms and work with the teachers. And more importantly, make sure that the principals are able to serve as the instructional leaders that they are hired to be. Too many times building principals get stuck in the day-to-day management of what's happening in the facilities and everything else that goes on in the building. And that prohibits them from getting into the classrooms, seeing what's happening with regard to the instruction and making sure that it's high quality. With respect to the other facets that you mentioned, I've actually overseen departments for all of them. So if we talk about facilities, we know that the facilities need to be safe and secure, first and foremost, right? They also need to be clean and conducive to learning. It would also be helpful for them to have some flexible spaces that allow different types of learning to take place. But again, we may not have the opportunity to redesign the buildings. So that's a luxury that may not come up during anyone's superintendency here. But another piece of that facilities work is making sure that the proper maintenance procedures and plans are in place as well. Because if the kids and the teachers are, in a stifling room and it's 90 degrees outside and the heat doesn't go off, that's an issue. You can't comfortably learn in that environment. Similarly, you mentioned nutrition. With respect to nutrition, we know food insecurity is one of the greatest challenges our country faces. I can say that at BMR, our nutrition department delivered and handed out over 300,000 meals through the course of COVID to our community. And our food service providers are heroes. So students need that nutrition to make sure that, and some of our students, that's the only nutrition they're getting is in the schools. So we need to make sure that it's proper for them to be able to function and learn and interact with one another. But in addition to it being a staple and them needing the nutrition, it can also contribute to the environment of the school. I know that I've worked with our food service director and we've done samplings at different schools and tried to identify specific things that kids like to eat and that teachers like to eat. We also played around with a couple of theme days this past year. We had a luau theme at the middle school, and then we had a movie theater theme. Personally, I'm a tremendous fan of movie theater popcorn, so I got there during the movie theater theme, and it was enjoyable. So that last piece you mentioned was technology. Technology serves really twofold in instruction, in supporting the instruction, right? Technology needs to be part of the infrastructure to allow the students equitable access to their education. Nowadays, these Chromebooks are in front of everyone and everything is online platforms, but not everyone has internet service at home, right? We need to be making sure that we're addressing those needs for technology so that kids have equitable access to the curriculum. And then there's the piece of technology that should be used to augment the instruction. When technology is properly incorporated into the instruction, it makes it more meaningful, it makes it more enjoyable, and hopefully we should be bringing in the equipment and machinery that these students will be able to apply a practical application of what they're learning with these real world tools, right? If we're expecting people to, I say real world, if we're expecting students in an earth science class to understand, seismography, and we bring in some systems that allow them to see what actually happens with respect to, a scientist can see this occurring when there's tectonic movement, they understand that and they can connect better to that information when they can see it, touch it, and know that there's actually technology in their real world that applies. That one was a little outdated, so it might not really apply to everyone here, but that's being a former earth science teacher as well as other sciences, it's one that came to my mind.
Thanks very much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Brittany?
Thank you for that. I think some of what I'm about to ask you may have just addressed, but if you can elaborate on this question, that would be great. So we sometimes hear that all kids can learn, but not all kids do learn. To what extent is their ability to learn and our ability to serve them a function of curriculum, classroom instruction, good finances, or good facilities? And what can you as a superintendent do about this to improve the outcome that students have?
So I strongly believe that all students can learn and all students do learn. It's those factors that you just mentioned and others that just may impact to what degree they're learning or how effectively they're learning or what they're struggling with. It's the role of the superintendent to make sure that all of those ancillary factors that contribute to the learning process are specifically aligned with what the learning goals are. And that starts with the strategic planning for the district. I know that I read the most recent strategic plan, but it ended this year for Athol-Royalston. I haven't seen a new plan. I know that in BMR, we just finished, we call ours the district blueprint, and we just revised it because it's clearly an organic document. You don't just tear up the work you did the last 3 years and start over. We're now on district blueprint 2.0. And in my district, it's my responsibility to make sure that all of the finances, all of the curricula, all of the resources are aligned with the goals that are outlined in that plan. And not just, it doesn't just stop at alignment. That seems like it's a one-time piece, but it's not. In BMR, we've got a lot of catchphrases, quite honestly. And someone caught me at one of the other interviews. I am a big fan of Brene Brown, so you may hear some quotes. But at BMR, we inspect what we expect. And it's important to make sure that we're doing just that when we're talking about the alignment of the resources with the instructional goals of the district. Because things change regularly. And if you're not continuously monitoring what the uses of the finances are and making sure that you're getting the best bang for your buck with respect to achieving the goals that you've identified, then you could be wasting money. You also could be wasting other resources. So the role of the superintendent really should be to ensure the alignment of all of the district resources to achieve the goals that are outlined in that plan, and then make sure that you're staying on top of monitoring the use of those resources, because you may find that they're not having the impact that you want. And then you may need to change what those resources are that you're putting into play.
Tammy.
Welcome, Matt. My question for you this evening is, please give examples of quality programs or policies to improve the quality of instruction that you have implemented in another school district. Can you give examples of such that were not successful and what course of action you took as a result?
So two things come to mind when I think about quality programs regarding instruction. The second one's not as much a program, but I'll get to that in a minute. The first I would say is this past year, we introduced in our RTI block into every building schedule so that the teachers were able to work specifically with smaller groups of students on specific concepts that that group of students may not have understood well or haven't mastered. There's a lot of data analysis that goes along with that in the from the professional learning communities that we have in place at the school building. Those are more of our grade level instructional teams. They monitor the data, the formative assessments, and just, I say formative assessments, that could just be the work that the students are doing. That's a formative assessment, right? But they're taking that data, they're analyzing it, and they're seeing where kids are struggling, and they're putting them into groups so that they could give directed instruction to address the needs of those smaller groups of students. That has been very effective for us this year. We've seen tremendous growth with respect to our student growth percentiles, almost across the board for all students in all subgroups. The other piece that I was thinking of, while it's not a program, we reorganized our elementary schools. We reconfigured them. There were two separate elementary schools, grades K through 6, one similar to Royalston Community School. It was like a single grade, a single classroom at each grade level. Another one had 4 or 5 classrooms at each grade level in Blackstone. So we came up with a plan and we implemented this plan to reconfigure the buildings, and we ended up putting together an early learning center, which goes PK to 2 for the entire district, and elementary school that has grades 3 through 5. Now, that allowed us to get equitable access to courses for the students. It allowed equitable access to the specials that they were referring to. It allowed equitable access for class sizes for those kids, because that wasn't the case. And it also allowed equitable planning time for the teachers. I will say that was a struggle to move through the community. It took a lot of communication, a lot of understanding, and there was significant hesitance on the part of the teachers because people get used to what they're doing and they like where they're doing it. But I can say that now we're a year into the move. We still have to accomplish phase 2. The second grade still needs to move over to Millville Elementary School. In fact, I have the movers coming next week. But I can say it has been tremendous. And the teachers that have moved already have gotten very acclimated and now appreciate the opportunities that they have with their grade level colleagues to do some planning on a daily basis, or just to talk about what's happening with the students and the curriculum. So that was a very effective implementation, I would say, or change, not necessarily a program. One that didn't work, I wouldn't say that it didn't work, but I will say, I mentioned earlier the RTI blocks that we put in. I said almost all groups of students experienced significant growth. Our 7th grade did not. So when we looked at our middle of the year assessments for the 7th grade, we actually, even that from the beginning of the year assessments with the 7th grade, we identified we needed to do something very different. And we found the funding. As I said, we need to be able to change where we're allocating those resources. We moved some funding around, and we introduced math interventionists into that 7th grade section of the middle school. When we got the MOY data, it wasn't really great. And then what happened was it caused us to reflect and say, what's happening? We now have, you know, this RTI block. Kids are supposed to be getting this really targeted instruction. We have math interventionists who are working with smaller groups in the math classes to really help those kids struggling with their concepts. I can't say that it will be 100% effective change, but I can say that I worked with the principal at the middle school to get under the hood of what was happening. And we identified it was a struggle to get math interventionists. And the people that we brought in were newer teachers to the profession, and they hadn't had a ton of experience. And the principal of the building had them pulling kids with significant needs in math, and they were struggling. So just through conversations with the principal, we said, why wouldn't you flip that model? And she said, well, wait, I was told I'm hiring a math interventionist. This is a math intervention piece, right? And I had to have a conversation with the principal as well and say, this is part of that adaptive leadership that we need our principals to engage in. We started this process thinking, okay, we're going to add math interventionists. They pull the small groups and support the kids that are struggling. But they don't know the math the best. The math teacher knows the math the best. So have the person you just hired that's new work with the kids that understand what's happening, and have the math teacher pull those smaller groups of kids and do that intervention work with them. And you know, surprisingly, the principal, you know, responded with, I can do that. I was like, absolutely, you can do that. We empower you to do that. You are the instructional leader in this building, and we want you to have the authority and know you have the authority to make these adaptive changes as your program calls for it. So that was a change that we did make for something that wasn't working. I can't tell you that it was extremely successful because we don't have the data yet, but I do think that it will have an impact.
TJ.
Welcome, and thank you for showing interest in our superintendent's position. Could you please discuss your experience with school building projects or major renovations?
Yes. So I have overseen personally working with the building inspectors, designers, and construction workers. I built 3 security vestibules in 3 different buildings at our district. I have undergone recently over $200,000 worth of repairs to our athletic facilities. We put new fencing on the baseball and softball fields, and we're installing dugouts. We also resurfaced the tennis courts, fixing some cracks. We did a very quick patch job on the track, which is a much larger process when you want to resurface it and or replace it. I happen to know that the district is looking into that work, and I am very familiar with building and construction projects in the district, so I certainly would be able to lend my expertise toward that project. I've worked with MSBA when I entered the district, one accelerated repair project was going on. That was at the complex, and that was for windows, doors, and boilers. I worked with the OPM and the contractor, the general contractor, and I didn't directly oversee the work, but I oversee the management of that. Or I said OPM, sorry for those, the owner's project manager. That's the company assigned to help the district manage the work. Sometimes I found the district has to manage the managers in order to get the work done, but that's pretty much like anything. So I was saying that project, I came into the district and it was just starting. So I oversaw the project, but I wasn't part of moving that process into the queue for MSBA. I did start another MSBA accelerated repair project at our Millville Elementary School. And that was the replacement of the oil burning burners to propane. And for that project, I worked with design teams and the MSBA. I had to go out and make presentations to the finance committees, the capital planning boards of the towns. And strangely enough, yes, both towns, because they also have to approve the work that happens to the other building, even though it's owned by the town of Millville. Blackstone, according to the MSBA, because it's a regionalized district, K through 12, they can't be opposed to that work. They may not have to fund that work, but they can't be opposed to it. So I went through that process with the MSBA as well. Most recently, I have been serving as the facilitator for our capital planning subcommittee. We had a study done a couple of years back that identified a tremendous amount of issues within our district, probably over $200 million worth of work that will need to be done over the next 20 years. And that started conversations about, what are we doing? Are we just going to keep trying to, put Band-Aids on things or fix them as they break? Or are we going to get ourselves in gear and do some larger projects? So we decided to submit a statement of interest for a core renovation project for our high school, which is the highest need building in our district. So again, I had done community presentations. I facilitated those meetings. I went to the finance boards, the capital planning boards, the select boards, discussing these projects that we were looking to move forward and why we were trying to submit the statement of interest. And interestingly enough, the statement of interest submission doesn't even cost anything at first, but we wanted the towns to be aware of what the entire process was and what they could see coming down the pipeline for potentially impacting their finances. Once we go into the feasibility study, if we're accepted into the program, there's going to have to be some money that comes out and is put toward the design team. I can tell you that I also worked with the design company and my director of facilities. We had to put together not just the statement of interest, but the accompanying capital improvement plan, an entire district facilities maintenance plan, and a master educational plan for the district. Those are really, really fun documents. I think I shared my website with you guys. If you have the opportunity, please, there's hundreds of pages of really enjoyable material that you can go through. And yeah, I encourage you to do that. So I have some pretty extensive experience with respect to building projects.
Thank you.
Nancy.
Welcome. When you consider how to fill vacancies, what are some of the things you consider in making a hire or in working with principals to make the hires at their schools? What would you want principals to think about when they hire these candidates? And what do you view as the role of the advisory committees in the selection of staff at the school and district level?
Excuse me. So I can start by saying, having been a building principal and a district leader, the most important thing that we can do as district employees are bring the right people in to join the district. That is the absolute most important thing we can do. I have probably in the course of my time hired an entire building full of staff through interviews and search processes. Most recently in BMR, I oversaw the search process for 2 of our principals, our high school principal most recently, and earlier one of our elementary school principals. I also oversaw the search process for our director of facilities and our director of special education. I'm sharing that information to get to this point. I will not compromise on the people that come into the district. When I oversaw the search committee for the principal of the elementary school and the team, by the way, it wasn't just me, I say I oversaw, we had a team of teachers, other administrators, parents, community members. We looked at the candidates, we went through their qualifications, and the first time we genuinely didn't feel that there was anyone that we wanted to put into the building. And then the second time, there was nobody that we wanted to put into the building. But I allowed that to happen. We ran that search 3 times before we found the right fit for the building and what needed to happen in that building. And we put the principal in, and things have changed dramatically in that building, and they've seen tremendous success with regard to the student outcomes. And that is from the efforts that the committee put in. And they were, I bless them, you know, the 3rd time they were at the table interviewing different candidates. It's a lot to sacrifice, but they were committed to getting the right people. And that's exactly what we did. So the principals, I know we have the Ed Reform Act of '93. Principals are in charge of hiring the personnel in the building. That's splendid. I personally cannot let someone join a district that I am overseeing unless I have met that person and feel comfortable enough to have them come in to the building. Now, does that mean I'm going to stonewall a principal's decision? No. But I need to meet that finalist that they're putting forward to get the job. Because if I meet them and speak with them and don't feel that they're the right fit for the district, then I'm going to go back to the principal and I'm going to say, hey, I understand that this is your authority to make this hire, but what were the considerations that you took into account when this is the person that you guys chose? Or, maybe we need to keep looking. If the principal can justify that employee, I might look a little further and say, okay, well, we'll accept them. But I genuinely feel there are certain people you will know you want to be working in the district, and there are people that you will know that you will not want to be working in the district. With the role of the committees that you mentioned, I like to call this, I preach a lot of C's when it comes to search committees. So I try to explain what we should be looking for. As I mentioned, I've headed up a lot of these searches myself, but when the principals are doing this at their building level, because that's where the teachers and the building staff are getting their search committees, those I'm not heading up, obviously. I talk about C's, right? They should be looking for continuity and commitment. Is this person that you're speaking to jumping around from district to district? Are they having problems in other districts and looking to leave? Or is the district looking to get rid of them? They should be looking at content. Does this individual know the content material that we're expecting them to teach our kids? They have to have strengths in the content area in order to make sure that our kids get the best understanding of that material. And then the other C's, which are possibly the most important, are care and commitment. I'm sorry, care and connecting. These people need to care about kids. And you can get that from interacting with people and putting them in front of groups of students. And we need to know that they can connect with the students, because if they can't develop a rapport with students and they don't care about kids, it's never going to work. I can say pedagogy is something that everyone comes out of, we all have our practices and classroom management skills that we learned in our Ed 101 classes. And then we have our content material that we have from whatever our background is. But I can teach, and my principals can help classroom management, pedagogy, understanding the systems and structures of the district. I can't teach someone to love working with kids. That just happens or it doesn't happen. And I need people to be in the district that love working with kids and are going to be doing that for the long haul. So to me, that's the most important piece that these committees should be, looking for.
Thank you. Tammy?
Please give us 2 examples of decisions you've had to make in the past 6 months that have proved to be good ones. What influenced your decision? Why were they good decisions? And what alternatives did you consider?
One of the good decisions that I made in the past 6 months was I made the determination after speaking to my superintendent to appoint my interim director of facilities to the permanent director of facilities position without having any more interview process for the upcoming year. We had spoken to the school committee about this position. The school committee understood that this individual had the very necessary technical skill sets. This individual had previously been a head custodian and worked in the district for 20 some odd years. And this individual cared about the district and was committed to the work of the district. For the last year, when he's been serving as the interim director, I've been mentoring this individual to make sure that his administrative skills are coming up to speed, which is, quite frankly, that's still a concern of mine, that he will still need to grow with respect to those areas. His writing, his communication, the emails that he sends out, they need to be tweaked. His filing systems and keeping records of the buildings and the AHERA reports and all of the mold work that gets done in our buildings. So I needed to work with him on Google Files and managing his organization. But I believe it was a good decision because he's an asset to the district, and the school committee agreed that he is an asset to the district. And I think that we should be showing the people that are committed that we're going to stay committed to them. Had his interim year, or it's not even completed yet, but had it been the absolute most successful? Nope. There were speed bumps along the way, and there were things that I had to address and or correct. Had I seen other facilities director candidates that were coming out with master's degrees in facilities management? Yes, I had. But they brought different skill sets. This individual brought his commitment to the district, his technical skill sets. And as I said, I felt comfortable working with him to get him to a place up to speed with regard to the administrative work. So I think that was a good decision. And I do believe that the district will benefit because of it, because of his commitment. Another decision that I made, people may not like this decision. We had a PTO fundraiser. I hate to pick on the middle school. We had a PTO fundraiser at the middle school, and that fundraiser was a color run. This color run, actually, my getting involved in the color run only came about because of disciplinary actions that needed to be taken with respect to a staff member. The principal reached out to me and explained, hey, we had color run going on today. And this individual said, I've got 3 kids in my class. This whole thing is stupid. Screaming this to the principal across the hall. And she said, you need to teach your class. And the teacher said, this is absolutely ridiculous. I am not going to teach the class. The teacher was completely insubordinate and disrespectful and otherwise inappropriate to the principal of the building. And that's how it came to me as a disciplinary issue. When I started digging under the hood of this situation, I asked the principal, tell me more about this color run. Well, kids raise money, and if they raise enough money, they get to go outside and they run laps around the building, and they get like colored powder tossed on them, and it's fun. It celebrates, you know, it's spring and they're out and they're running and it's colorful. I was like, and it's a fundraiser for the PTO. I said, that's great. How do they raise the money? Well, they get a list and they go and get sponsors, and you have to raise $15 in order to be able to participate. So I said, so let me understand this better. Kids just need to walk around door to door or have their relatives commit to giving them money so that they can participate in this activity. Yes. Well, what about the students that live on the outskirts of Millville that are watching their younger siblings all day until their parents come home, and they don't have an opportunity to go door to door? They don't even have anyone door to door next to them, right? How is that equitable for them? How are they getting an opportunity to participate in the activity? And then I went a step further. Now you have kids that are not allowed to go and participate in the color run, and you have handfuls of 3-4 students in a classroom. What's happening in the classroom? Oh, well, not to worry, there's instruction happening in the classroom. Really? There's instruction happening in the classroom? That's great. What about the 90% of the class that's outside running, that's now missing the instruction that's happening in the classroom for those 3 or 4 students? And I will tell you, the teacher was absolutely right that it was completely stupid. I will say his behavior, the teacher's behavior, was inappropriate and needed to be addressed. But that being said, it brought to light the fact that this whole process was inequitable. It was bad for kids. It was bad for instruction, and it needed to be tweaked. Do we have to throw it out? No, but let's introduce at least another way that kids can qualify to participate. Maybe writing an essay about diversity, or why they should be allowed to join the color run, or what that even means to them, right? Let's come up with alternatives so that every one of our kids has equal access to this activity. It remains to be seen. I will tell you, I think that has resulted in something very positive. Next year's color run will, I guess, tell the real story. But I certainly know that process will be run differently.
Thank you. Nancy.
Okay. How would you ascertain the public's perception of the school system, and what steps will you take to improve the perception?
So that work for an incoming superintendent should start long before July 1st. A superintendent needs to meet with the staff of the buildings, the students at the buildings, and the parents and community at the buildings, and understand what their concerns are, and give them the opportunity to voice what their concerns are, and have that open dialogue and the back and forth with the superintendent. I also would be reaching out to all of the town leaders, finance committee chairs and finance committees, capital planning committees, select boards, to meet with them and get a better understanding of what's happening between those groups and the district, and how are those working relationships. That would also include public safety, because that's one of the most important relationships you have to develop between the police department and the fire department in the school system. So I would be reaching out to all of these different constituents, meeting with them, speaking and understanding what the concerns are to get a better understanding of what the perception is of the district. I'd also be putting into place mechanisms that allow that work to happen continuously. That's not a one-time thing. You can't meet with the teachers and the staff and the students once and say you understand everything, because by the time October comes around, their thoughts may be completely different on what's happening in the school. You need to make sure that there's channels of communication that allow the community to access the superintendent, whether that's through open door hours, whether that's through Facebook Live interactions. We found that very successful in our community. I'm kind of rolling into, I guess, improving the perception. So get the dipstick of the perception, understand, but then the work that needs to happen to improve the perception is communication and transparency. The towns and the people and the constituents need to know what's happening in our school systems. They need to understand what's going on at the middle school. They need to know what activities are happening. I saw there's a multicultural celebration on June 2nd, just standing in the hallway. There's a flyer there. I don't know who else knows about that. I know that the website here in Athol-Royalston seems to be functional, yet potentially something that could be improved upon. I know that when I entered BMR, the superintendent and I identified our web presence and our social media presence as a significant concern. And we incorporated a new web site that has an accompanying app for your phone, not the parents app. The parents app is separate. So there's the parents app that they can download to communicate and get the specific notifications from whichever schools they're looking to get those notifications from, and it syncs it all to their same calendar. But there's an app for the administrators so that they can contribute to those communications. There's an app, Thrill Share. We literally, at any event, I can take a picture, put in some type of a comment, and send it to our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and our website, all within 40 seconds and the push of one button. That's the type of communication that needs to happen in the district to make sure that we're improving the perception, right? People need to know what's happening. They need to have some voice as to what is happening. Again, even where are we putting out our publications, right? There's school newsletters. Are those school newsletters going to the senior centers? Are those school newsletters going to the public libraries or other organizations? Yep, we love our electronics nowadays, and it's very easy to say, oh, we do our newsletter on SMORE, and that's how it goes out to all our parents. First of all, not all of your parents have computer access, but more importantly, that limits your clientele to those people that are connected to your SMORE account and who you're distributing it to. What about the rest of the community? They should know what's happening in the school district. And even more so, in towns like Athol and Royalston, I can tell you because I live in the Wachusett Regional District, and we're small towns. The school system is probably the biggest provider of space and resources. What are the programs that we're offering the community? Are we having adult education programs? Are we having just open forums for learning about resources? Are we doing anything? At BMR, actually Sunday from 1 to 4, if anyone from BMR is watching, please join us, 1 to 4. we have our District of One Family Fun Day. And we have partners that are working with the district, whether it's the Boys and Girls Club of the Blackstone Valley area, whether or not it is the senior center, the library. We have some service providers for mental health services that will be there, and where we have our kids running games and activities. The Youth Football League is coming to this event. And as part of the day, they're going to have some football games that they're running. Get the kids engaged, get the families engaged, and see what's out there in our community and make the schools an integral part of what's happening in the community. I served on a school committee similar to you guys. And I will tell you, I've been on the town floor in Rutland when we're trying to pass a budget. And inevitably, it always turns into, how are we going to take this money from public safety and give it to the school system's budget? And what are the schools doing? And what's happening? The people in that meeting should know what's going on at the schools, and they should be involved with the schools. They should be looking at the schools as a resource for them. We should be working with the senior center, not fighting for funding, against the senior center. And I understand funding is tight, and that's a whole other story, where those are the political connections and the relationships you have to develop in the town. But when you develop those relationships, then people understand this is not a combative, I want the money, you can't have the money. It's how do we all work together to make the best of what we have, because our towns only have limited resources. So hopefully through that type of work, that improves the perception of the district.
Lonnie.
I know I went a little bit far on improving the perception, but clearly I'm passionate about that.
Hi, good evening. My question is, how would you participate in local civic organizations and community relations development?
So I won't make this one as long because I touched upon a lot of this. I think the first thing I would need to do in this community is outreach those pieces of the town that are pieces of the community, the senior centers, the libraries, whatever other services are happening in the district, food pantries, the local churches. We need to make those connections. And then there's other sources as well, not just the town organizations. As I mentioned, in BMR, I've made connections, and we have our food service department providing lunch for the seniors at the senior center. And we have like samplings that go on to see what they like. That's a partnership that we've developed. We are catering events at the library, and we have our band. We have a national award-winning band program, and we have our jazz ensemble going to the library and playing for the community every now and then. We set that up. Those are the types of things that can be set up. If they're not to suggest, again, I'm not here in this district, so I don't know what all of those relationships are, but I would need to find out, and I would need to develop them and strengthen them strengthen them if they're not where they need to be. You mentioned, the civics work. There's also chambers of commerce. Are we making connections with the Athol Chamber of Commerce? I know there's a North Quabbin Chamber of Commerce. There's a Greater Gardner Area Chamber of Commerce. I have a personal friend of mine who manages the Aubuchon in Gardner. I will maybe get in trouble. I texted him and I said, if I get this job, you're going to be sponsoring everything at Athol-Royalston. He just sent me back a laughing emoji. I don't think he realizes I wasn't kidding. But it's those types of relations and connections that you need to build.
Thank you.
Elaine.
Hi there.
Hi.
How would you expect to be evaluated as the superintendent? On what measurements would you expect to be graded after 1 year or at 2 years or 3? When would be a fair point to evaluate your performance as a superintendent?
So I believe that I would certainly need to use the superintendent rubric for the Department of Ed and make sure that the pieces I'm putting into or pulling out of that rubric for my evaluation are specifically intertwined with the goals of the strategic plan for the district, because my goals are the district's goals. I need to make sure that those things are happening. So with respect to I will tell you, I encourage in addition to the superintendent's rubric, I'm a big fan of 360-degree reviews. I want to get feedback from every constituent and find out what the perception is of me everywhere, because I can't work on it unless I know what people think. And you mentioned year benchmarks. So, I mean, obviously, there would be benchmarks, particularly with student learning goals outlined in my goals that, as I mentioned, would be connected to the strategic plan. But just having looked at the district and from what I know, I would need to work on some specific goals with the committee because those are our goals, right? So I need to work on with you to develop some of my goals. But with respect to student outcomes, in my first year, I'd hope to see at least an increase of 5 points with respect to every category of student growth percentile. I'd want to see growth in this district. My performance is determined by student outcomes. What the work that we're doing in this district is defined by the student outcomes. That's who we're here for. So for year one, I would say I would need to have an entry plan, and I will have needed to have executed on that entry plan. And that should be part of my evaluation for year one, as well as from a student perspective, I'd hope to see at least a 5-point gain in all student growth percentiles. That might be lofty. I may never meet that goal, but I will tell you this, I certainly hope that my work, if I were to be the superintendent of the district, my work will not be judged entirely on whether or not every single specific piece of my goals are met, because my goals are going to be lofty. If we don't set our goals higher than we expect them to be, they're really not goals. They're just, we know we could do this. So I'd want to see 5 points of gain in the first year. In the second year, I'd want to see that my entry plan was fully completed, that we've developed additional partnerships, and that our student growth percentiles, I'm sure you're realizing, I'm a fan of student growth percentiles as opposed to achievement levels, because I know that kids are where they are. I want to see them grow. If they had a needs improvement or not meeting standards, it's not to me about getting to exceeds or, you know, or a proficient or meeting. To me, it's how much growth did they make? So all, I would hope, are approaching the 50% mark by the end of my second year. Again, probably lofty. And by the end of my third year, I would like to see that I would probably need to have a new strategic plan developed for the district that everyone is aware of and is on board with, and all of the school improvement plans are aligned with that strategic plan. From the student perspective, I'm hoping that everyone's over the 50% mark and that all of the schools in this district are in a place where they're making substantial progress and we're not submitting any type of turnaround reports or any progress monitoring to the state. That would be, again, a lofty goal for the third year.
Mitch, do you want to?
Yes.
Okay.
Speaking again for Carla, I've been with you, can't be here tonight. She's actually listening in.
Hi, Carla. Sorry you can't be here this evening.
And this is related to what you just said, so give you a chance. Thank you.
Now everyone is wondering why I just said hi to Carla.
Okay, there we go.
We don't
So
want the
for
guy
Carla,
who
you can
randomly
expand-
said hi to Carla.
You can expand on your comments here. How would you measure your own success after 1 year and after 2 years?
So again, I'm a fan of a 360-degree type of evaluation for myself. I would be a new superintendent, and I would intend to be participating in the new superintendent's induction plan and program, sorry. And as part of that program, there are benchmarks and indicators that the program monitors with those superintendents. There's mentorship and there's assessing where things are with respect to your work and performance in the district. So my personal goals would probably be aligned with that program. That would be for mid-year and annual. I failed to mention this, by the way, in the last question. I don't want to wait for a year to pass before I have some feedback on my performance. I want to have mid-year evaluations. I want to get feedback on my performance at the mid-year mark, because if my trajectory is slightly off, at least I can make some quarter turns at the mid-year, as opposed to hearing at the end of the year, hey, we really are disappointed that this didn't go the way you had expected, right? And I will say, my superintendent in the district I work, we have mid-year evaluations. And as far as I'm concerned, the superintendent evaluation is an evaluation of the entire work of the district. It's a tremendous team effort, and I want to know that we're progressing in the way that we should be. So I want mid-year evaluations. On a personal level, I can't go to sleep at night unless I feel I've done what's right for kids. So that's my main measure, in addition to the superintendent induction program.
Thank you. TJ.
Please discuss your experience with regional schools, particularly the relationship between or among the towns, the balancing of various needs and views, and the tensions that can result, particularly around the budgeting.
The budget. So I have spent 9 years in regional district. Most recently, as mentioned or on my resume, I spent 4 years as the assistant superintendent in the Blackstone-Millville Regional District. And I have developed continuously all of those relationships that are necessary to have the proper work happen between the district and the towns. You have to develop the relationships, and one of the key components of that is involving them in the process from the start, particularly with respect to the budget. What is the budget process? I know that I submit to the school committee my budget process outlined right from, we start working on it almost in October. So that whole timeline through to the approval at annual town meeting is given to the school committee at the start of the process. And the finance committees in the towns and the select boards in the towns, capital boards don't need to be involved in the budget as much, but the finance and the select boards are involved from the start. Once we know what the principals' goals are with respect to their priorities and what they're looking to fund, we start involving the towns. It's an open, transparent process from start to finish. And at some point in that process, I have a joint town meeting where I bring all of the constituents from both towns in my district to the table, and we review what the budget is and what our priorities are, and we help them understand why we've allocated the funding the way we have. Additionally, some districts, and I'm not familiar, I looked at the budget here, but some districts are not really transparent with respect to all of the funding sources. When I put together a budget, I show where all of our grants are coming from, where all of our athletic fees are coming from and going to, where our music user fees are. We list in our budget the money that the district takes in from the athletic gate fees for the sporting events, and how that money will be applied to offset the cost to the towns. And we do that intentionally so that the towns administrators and boards, and more importantly, the people can see we are maximizing the use of every single penny that we have so that we can offset or reduce the amount that we have to charge to the towns. And I can say, last night I was at the Millville annual town annual town meeting, and our budget was passed unanimously. It's hard to not pass a budget unanimously when we worked to get it to, Millville saw a 1.01% increase in their operating budget. And Blackstone saw a 3.03% increase in their operating budget. It excludes some of the capital, because we do have some capital projects that are, we have them funded differently. They're budgeted and they're explained to the towns, but I'm just referencing that percent increase doesn't include the capital projects. And those percentages are with the minimum local contribution for each town going up over 6.7%. So each of our towns saw a 6-point-something% increase in their minimum local contribution, and their overall operating increase for our district budget was 3.03 and 1.01.
Thank you.
Laura.
I hope, did that answer your question? Okay.
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Hi. And you may have already kind of dived into this question as well already.
I may have said everything.
What is your experience with budget development, including developing relationships with town government in regards to maintaining financial partnerships?
Yeah, maybe I went too far in that last question. Again, it's about transparency. It's about the process. It's about involving the towns from the start. I can say, so if I'm speaking specifically to budgets, I will speak specifically to finances. As I mentioned, I've been working in regional districts for 9 years. I've had 9 annual audits where there were never any significant findings. I've had 9 budgets that were passed with no overrides to anybody. And there were no major concerns or contentions between the towns or the district. And I've submitted 9 end of the year reports to the Department of Education. We've had to make a couple of tweaks here and there, but that's just alignment of the coding between their SIMS data and our function codes with respect to our budgeting process. But so I can say that I've been involved in 9 years of budgeting and finance work in addition to district leadership work that has yielded very positive results.
Thank you. Elaine.
The roles and responsibilities of the school committee and the superintendent are sometimes clear and sometimes ambiguous. For example, budget approval versus budget implementation, personal policy and finance versus personnel administration, or even dealing with parents and teachers with concerns or complaints. Please describe a situation where these roles and responsibilities have challenged you and how you would work to address them as our superintendent.
I'm going to refer back to a conversation I believe Tammy and I had during our site visit. The superintendent and the school committee need to work together to move the district forward. All of our work is intertwined. Now, to your point or to the point of the question, right, the school committee oversees the budget, the policies, and the evaluation of the superintendent. That doesn't mean that they don't get calls from everyone with respect to everything else that happens in the district. My take on that is I am in constant communication with the school committee. The school committee needs to know what's happening in the district before anybody else does. If I have heating coils that break at the high school, I let the school committee know first. And then I let the teachers know, well, maybe first I call the repairs, but I need to have them know what's going on, because once that word gets out to the community, they're not going to call the superintendent's office to find out what's happening at the high school. Why did classes have to be relocated? Is there some kind of a scare? No. The school committee can say, absolutely not. Don't worry. We were already informed. There were some heating coils that burst. There was some smoke. It was fixed. Classes were relocated for a short period of time. It'll be done by Monday, and that will take care of that. You guys are the gateway between the community and the school system. And I need to make sure that that gateway is always open, and that when people are trying to come through it, they have the right information so that they feel connected to the district. So to me, that is my way of developing a working relationship that, yep, the school committee has their responsibilities and administration has our responsibilities. I don't expect that the school committee will ask about the specifics of an HR situation, but I may fill in, right? I will fill in the financial implications of some legal actions that need to be taken due to the HR situation that we're dealing with. Will I get into the specifics of the individuals or what happened potentially? I might not be able to, but you can rest assured that every bit of information that I am able to legally share, I will legally share. The other part of your question was what issues I've had. I honestly can't think of issues that I've had with our school committee because my superintendent and I have had that relationship from the start. I can think of one time where we were a bit at ends. I will say we had a teacher who posted something on Facebook. This teacher is excellent friends with a woman in the community who is divorced. And this teacher posted on her Facebook page, yeah, this guy is a piece of work. I'll politely say that for the public audience. Right? And went on a bit of a tirade about how this individual is no good. You know, she's lucky she got rid of him, and that's that. Well, those individuals that were separating were parents of a student in this teacher's class. And that teacher got written up for not paying attention to that detail and putting that student through emotional distress and saying things that were inappropriate. That's that student's dad, right? Let's try to leave their personal family problems out of our work. That was grieved. And it went, the superintendent denied it also. He agreed with me 100%. We said, nope, you cannot say those things about a parent of a student in your class. It went to the school committee level grievance, and the school committee actually overturned it. And they said, this member of the community, this teacher has been a member of the community for a tremendous amount of time. They're respected. We can't control their personal relationships, and we can't control what they post on their social media. I would still argue they can't be saying things publicly that have an impact on their child. But the grievance was just, you know, it was upheld at the school committee level. All of the documentation of that issue was removed and it went away. That is the authority of the school committee. That is the process. So whether we agreed on that or not, I respect their authority to do that. And hopefully if something like that comes up another time, maybe people will, you know, try to take a bit of a different perspective. One from the kid that's sitting in that chair or that goes outside and hears what the teachers are saying about his or her dad. So that's the closest thing I think I can say to like a butting heads, but sometimes we'll have to agree to disagree.
Thank you. That concludes the question period this evening. So at this point, if you would like to give a closing statement, feel free.
I'm imagining that not a lot of you want to hear me continue to talk. So I will simply say, so I tricked you. I will simply say, I am very confident that I have the skill set and the experience that Athol-Royalston needs to help move this district forward. I know of the work that's taking place, and it's the right work. In fact, it's much of the same work that I've been leading in Blackstone Millville. And for those that are not aware, the communities in Blackstone and Millville are very similar to Athol and Royalston. The demographics are very similar. The town configuration is very similar. We have the same number of buildings, same number of principals, and we have the same number of students. I'm currently leading Blackstone and Millville in much of the same work, and I feel confident that I could continue to lead that work here.
Thank you very much.
See, that was a relatively short answer. Am I?
So we have about 10 minutes before the next candidate. I'd rather take the 10 minutes and then you can grab something to eat and then be back. So, thank you. This is like a TV timeout.
Thank you. Good evening.
This is the Athol-Royalston Regional School Committee. Previously, you met with the search committee at the semifinalist stage. Allow me to introduce you folks to Dr. John Provost, the current superintendent of the Northampton school system. So what we'll do this evening is, if you want to give, we have questions prepared. If you want to give an opening statement about yourself and why you're here, et cetera, you can do that at this point, and then we'll move into the questions.
Sure. Thank you very much. And I'd like to begin by just thanking everybody who's welcomed me into their school community since I've become a candidate here. Apologize for the mask. I'm in COVID protocols right now, so I have to keep that on. I do thank you for the water, but I will not unmask to drink it tonight for your protection. I would also like to thank whoever scheduled the hockey match at the entrance tonight, because now forevermore I'll be able to say I once went to an interview and a hockey game broke out. What I'd like you to know about me as a leader is that I believe in making schools work better for those who are least well served. I believe the true measure of our success is whether we can create fairer systems that make success possible for ever greater portions of the students who come to our schools. I bring a servant leadership approach to my work because I believe the best and most legitimate use of authority is to lift others up. I have a focus on building adult community. That I came to, and building relational trust. I come to that through my work with the Center for Courage and Renewal, which is sort of an outgrowth of my work in servant leadership. That is based on some really important research that was done in Chicago public schools when they were going through a process of decentralization, and hundreds of schools in the district, and their thought was, maybe the problem is the superintendent and the school committee, so let's essentially let each school run itself. They found that after decentralization, a third of the schools got much better, a third of the schools got much worse, and a third of the schools didn't change at all. And normally, as researchers are trained, you'd say, well, we picked the wrong variable. Centralization, decentralization doesn't matter at all. However, the researchers took a second look at that and said, well, is there something different about those that improved and those that didn't improve? And what they found was the improvers were schools that had strong relational trust. And so I've been trained in a program called Leading Together that's focused on building relational trust in schools. And that's something that I believe strongly in. I noticed that I think it's an important connection because relational trust is also part of the RIDES model that's part of your strategic improvement plan. So I'm very interested in that connection. When I was visiting the other day, I heard many people from all levels of the district talking about belongingness, which is a part of your district improvement plan, and also I think a component of relational trust and building culture. But most of all, what I heard people say when I was here is that they felt they were on the cusp of doing some really great things. And that matches my assessment. I believe this is a district on its way up. I believe it is at a very positive inflection point. And I would like to be a part of the success story, both to honor the work that's already been done and also to write my own chapter. So with that, I'm happy to hear your questions and have a discussion with you tonight.
Thank you. First question, Mitch.
Well, welcome back, and it's great to see you again. Given the stress in the lives of young people today and the social, academic, and even financial pressures they face, how can educators in general, and a superintendent in particular, have an impact on the emotional well-being of students?
So I think that the key to that is having a strong tiered system of support in place for students' social emotional well-being. That means having a system in place to identify students who are struggling, to have curriculum in place to support students in the development of social emotional skills and the development of stress reduction and stress management strategies, to be able to identify students who are not successful with sort of the general level skills that you provide to all students through the curriculum and who need additional supports, and have a way for them to get that kind of support in smaller group settings. And then to have a way of identifying students for whom that may not even be enough. So in our district, the way we do that is through a social emotional screener that we provide for all students. It's called the SABRS. For young students, it is an assessment that's filled out by the staff working with students. And for students in 5th grade and up, it's a self-report. But from that, we get a very good read on the overall level of need in the school, as well as individual students who are struggling within the programs that we're providing and need additional support. And then we're constantly working on making sure that both the primary levels of support and the secondary level of support is strong and evidence-based. So we do a lot with responsive classroom. We do a lot with PBIS, which I know is a program that this district has as well. We do a lot with zones of regulation. And I think the superintendent's role in supporting that is making sure that that framework is clearly articulated, making sure that it's supported through training and budget, and monitoring how it's actually implemented in the buildings.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mitch, would you like to read Carla's first question?
Thank you. This is from Carla Rabinowitz, a school committee member that was unable to be here tonight. She's watching on Zoom. What does high quality learning look like? And how would you support teachers in providing that type of learning? How does that incorporate the various facets, facilities, nutrition, technology of the district?
So when I think about high quality learning, the first word that comes to mind is rigor, which is a word that I've heard used several times in my visit to the district. I know it's an important part of the turnaround efforts here. And to break apart what that means, it means that the tasks that students are given to learn are challenging, that they're aligned to the state curriculum frameworks, that they are tasks that are designed such that if the students are able to master them, then they'll be able to demonstrate mastery on other measures of student performance that are considered to be important, such as MCAS, SAT, or any of those other types of student achievement tests. So that's high quality piece. It also has to be engaging. The level of challenge within the curriculum is is to a certain extent irrelevant if students are not engaging with the materials, because it's task really that predicts performance. It's not the content itself, but do you have students engaged in tasks that require them to use high-level skills that are aligned with the content standards? Now, bringing in facilities, nutrition, and technology, to me, those are all things that can facilitate high-quality learning. Facilities need to be safe, they need to be healthy, they need to be well lit, they need to be designed so that students can access the tasks that are being provided for them. The nutritional support that districts provide, and certainly we've all been providing to an even greater extent through COVID, is necessary to, again, facilitate learning, because when students are hungry, when students don't have the adequate energy to engage in the tasks, learning is not going to be optimal. They're not going to be able to pay attention. They may be focused more on the experience of hunger they're feeling rather than what's being offered in the class, and that can prevent engagement. And then technology is a tool, and it's something that can facilitate high quality learning. I don't think it's necessarily a component of high quality learning. I think it certainly can be a component of very low quality learning, but when used well, can be an accelerator. I think one of the best uses of technology is when technology can engage students in experiences that you can't provide within the classroom. So being able to take them virtually to places of the world where they wouldn't necessarily be able to go, that connect with the curriculum. Being able to give them an opportunity to see models, like models of the human organ systems working, models of internal combustion engine working, things that you can see as a picture in a textbook, and that's one thing, but when you can see a 3D image, you can get a different concept of it. But really, that's just providing stimulus material, right? So then the question is, so what do the students do with that knowledge? That's where the high quality learning comes in. So I've been on this virtual tour to Boston, let's say. What's the task that goes with that? Now that I've been there virtually, what can I do that I couldn't do before? How do we want to use that experience to push the students' abilities to a place that they wouldn't have been able to without that virtual tour experience? So those are how I see those specific components that you mentioned as supporting high quality learning. I wouldn't say those are necessarily an exhaustive list. Going back to your first question, I think providing emotionally safe spaces for students are an important component of high quality learning, because they create environments where students are more willing to engage with tasks because they know they can do it in a place where if they make a mistake, it'll be okay, where they're not likely to be targeted by peers for ridicule. So the list can go on and on, but I did want to address at least those pieces that you'd called out in your question as components of high quality learning.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Brittany.
Thanks for being here. We sometimes hear that all kids can learn, but that not all kids do learn. If that's the case, to what extent is their ability to learn and our ability to serve them a function of curriculum, good classroom instruction, good finances, or good facilities? And what can you as superintendent do about this to improve the outcome that students have?
So I guess I would say that I don't necessarily agree with the first part of the statement. It's something about not all students can learn. I believe that if a student is alive in a classroom, learning is inevitable. Now, what people mean sometimes when they say that not all students can learn is that the things they are learning are the things that we wouldn't intend for them to learn. Sometimes they're learning how to avoid the tasks that you're providing for them, the tasks that I said were a part of high quality learning. Sometimes they're learning what really annoys the school staff and their peers, but that's a kind of learning. So the question is, how do we get them to learn what we want them to learn? And that becomes it's a question of motivation. So again, I know PBIS is a program that's being implemented within the district. The whole purpose of that program is to build motivation for students to engage in the kinds of tasks that we believe will be valuable for them as educators. So how you can support the type of learning that we want them to have through curriculum and instruction is making sure that the instructional pieces of your PBIS program or whatever other programs you have around motivation are well designed and evidence-based, making sure they're implemented to fidelity, making sure that people have the training that they need in order to implement them well. Facilities can have an impact. You know, if students are in substandard facilities, I think it sends a message, and it's a constant message around how important the activity taking place in that building is. So making sure that your facility is as attractive as possible and as conducive to learning as possible. Again, and those are things by making sure that, you know, the facilities are safe, making sure they're well lit, making sure there's enough space for the students within them. And also make sure that they are, you know, appropriately designed for instructional control. Just to say another piece about that, you know, I once worked in a building that obviously was not designed by anyone who understood students, because it was circles. You know, the whole thing was circles and circles, and so a student could go 10 steps this way or 10 steps that way, and they were around a corner and couldn't see what was happening. So lines of sight are important, and there are other concepts that are important for facilities to help support student learning. But really, I think the key piece is the motivational program, and it's how the instructional routines and the overall motivation approach is supporting higher levels of response to tasks that we would accept as on-task behavior or learning behaviors.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tammy.
Please give examples of quality programs or policies to improve the quality of instruction that you have implemented in another school district. Can you give examples of such that were not successful and what course of action you took as a result?
So I will give you one that is the same program that was both. And it's also one that I know connects to the district, because here there's a strong emphasis on inclusion. I've been involved in many inclusive education efforts and programs. And inclusion is a very strongly evidence-based program. It provides undeniable benefits for students with disabilities and non-disabled peers. In our current district, we had a very strong reorganization of the program about 5 years ago. And that was a change that we were making for equity at a structural level. So what had happened was, in our community, there are 4 elementary schools. There are three areas of the town, and there's a ward system. And there's always sort of, historically had been some trouble maintaining even population growth among the 4 wards, or among the 4 attendance zones that were served by actually 7 wards. And there was a time when one of the schools was potentially slated for closure due to declining enrollment, before my time in the district. And one of the responses, it was very unpalatable to the residents of that area of town to have a closure of their elementary school. And so one of the solutions that had been derived was to put all of these self-contained special education programs in the district at the elementary level in that school as a way of increasing the enrollment. It was a school that was in status. It was known as level 3 status at the time, and for low achievement across the board, every subgroup. And when I came on as a superintendent there, one of the questions that the committee had is, why this school? Why is the performance so different than all the rest of the schools in the community. And it took me a long time to unpack it. And I remember apologizing to the school committee for taking so long to unpack it. It was kind of an answer that was so obvious, it was hard to see. But I ended up telling the school committee, the reason this is a level 3 school is because it's an administratively created level 3 school. Through the policy of placing all the substantially separate classrooms in that building, you made it level 3. And it created other problems within the district. There was high concentration of racial minority students within that school because of problems that we had with identification of students with disabilities. And so then the question was how to unroll that. And the decision that we made as an administrative leadership team is to attack it at the structural level. What I mean by structural level is you can make changes at the surface that don't really, change what's really driving issues. We could have shifted some kids here or there, but we didn't want to do that. We said we need to make a change that makes it impossible for this to ever happen again. And so we made all of the schools in the district full inclusion schools, pre-K through 5, and then that immediately eliminated any potential reason for a student not to be educated in their own home school. So from that point forward, all students stayed in their home schools. I would say in the first year of implementation, things went generally well in 3 of the elementary schools. In one school, the one that I was talking about, it was a struggle. I think the mistake there was we hadn't adequately accounted for the concentrated need that already existed in the building. And so we spent, and this is to the second part of your question, so what do you do when you find out something's not working? We spent an incredible amount of time that first year working with that school to get their inclusion program working the way that it needed to be. I personally remember being in the school more than 30 times just in the months of September and October. I happen to know that because one of my professional goals that year was to make more school visits. And I was like, well, I'm going to hit it just with this one school alone. But basically it was all hands on deck. So I was there all the time. The special education director was there all the time. Special ed supervisors were there quite often. We were bringing in supports from other elementary schools where things were working better to come in and share their practices. I think that was important because it sent the message that, other people in this same community with similar resources are having success, so you can do it too. And then we spent a great deal of time with the parents in that program. 2 things that stand out in my mind as sort of turning points in that year were in October, we were having particular challenges in 2 classrooms. They're both at the same grade level. And this is, I guess, to the facilities question you were asking earlier. They were kind of undersized for the numbers of students in there. There were larger classes available within the school. And I remember parents coming to me and saying, well, is it, we know it's hard to change around your configuration in the middle of the school year, but is it permitted for us to help? And, I said, it's probably on the edge of some of our policies. It probably really shouldn't happen, but I'm going to say yes. And that one Saturday in October, about 40 parents showed up to rearrange classrooms within the school. We had it done by about 2 or 3 o'clock that afternoon. And what was more important is we were building community. Parents were seeing how they could really be a part of the solution. I mean, in a very concrete way. Staff were seeing support from their families as people were carrying bookcases upstairs and downstairs. I mean, they were seeing not just, here's your plate of pastries on Teacher Appreciation Day, but people who are willing to put some sweat equity into it. And that created a different dynamic. But there were still some concerns. There were some feelings of anxiety among some of the parents around what was happening there. And then it brings me to the second piece. Again, it was empowering parents. I was invited to a school council meeting, and the president of the school council said, "We want you to be there. We want you to be a presence, but we don't want you to say anything." And what happened at that meeting was the council, speaking to other parents, basically said many of the things that I had been saying all along. Here are the benefits. Here are the additional resources that are added. This is what's going to happen in the school. And that helped to change it too, because parent to parent credibility is a little bit different than district to parent credibility. And so that was how we changed it. So the end of the story, we actually had 2 of the 4 elementary schools that were in status. That school was in status for all students. The other school was in status for special education students in particular, even though many of theirs would have been sent to this other school. Now none of the elementary schools are in status. And in fact, those 2 schools, those 2 that were in status, had their strongest performance on ELA MCAS achievement last year in the midst of a pandemic than they'd ever had in the history of MCAS 2.0. So when you start with a strong evidence-based program, you will get to good places. There will be bumps in the way, along the way. And I think the essential learning of that is don't give up on the evidence-based program. You're doing something that's solid. You're having results that aren't the results you expected. And so keep working the problem until you get the results you expect.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
TJ.
Welcome, and thank you for showing interest in our superintendent's position. Could you please discuss your experience with school building projects or major renovations?
So I have not done a complete school build from scratch. I have done 3 MSBA accelerated roof projects. I've done 1 MSBA accelerated repair window project. In total, those are 4 different buildings that we did renovations to. Have done a lot of ongoing renovation through our capital plan. So one of the goals that our city has set is for all municipal buildings to be carbon neutral buildings. And so we're in the process of upgrading the HVAC systems at each of our buildings. Basically, the way that process looks, and it's similar, so I'll just use it as an example, similar to other projects we've done, is to get some expert consultation to say, okay, what's the current status of your heating and cooling systems? What would be needed to get them from where they are to the goal you have? And then and then also like what's likely to fail soonest. And so what we've done is worked on sort of prioritizing those older systems that could potentially fail in the near term as the ones to get the first upgrades, so that as we go through, we're making everything more efficient. We're also having the most impact for our efficiency improvements because, as you can imagine, the older systems tend to be the less efficient systems. And so bit by bit, we're working our way through it. So that's a long project. It's an ongoing project. It always astounds me how much upgrades to Johnson controls and automated logic are. But they certainly are investments that are well worth it, and the energy savings you get, especially when energy prices are what they are right now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Nancy.
Sorry, technology. All right. When you consider how to fill vacancies, what are some of the things you consider in making a hire or in working with principals to make the hires at the schools? What would you want principals to think about when they hire their candidates? And what do you view as the role of the advisory committees in the selection of staff of the school in district level?
So I ask principals to focus and directors to focus mainly on process. Because I think that strong processes will yield strong candidates. And the things in particular that I asked them to look at are making sure that the selection process is as free of bias as possible. So there are things that we do within our community, like first of all, blinding the application so that people can't necessarily tell who they are, can't tell, you know, male or female, whatever, so that people are just looking at qualifications and not looking at other things that might cause them to make a decision that might not be based on the highest quality candidate. And then I asked them to think about the makeup of the screening committee. So I think it's important that the screening committee is representative of all the different folks that the position is going to touch, whatever the position might be. So in the types of hiring that we do in central office, that's people from across the district. In a building level, hiring committee would typically involve other teachers within the building, would involve other staff within the building who might not necessarily be teachers, would involve parents, depending on the grade level, students who would be part of the potential staff members' workload. And then I think in terms of process, making sure that everyone is a true participant in the process, that it's not sort of a rubber stamp committee, but that everybody, when they first come together and form as a committee, have an opportunity to discuss what they're looking for in a candidate, have an opportunity to develop questions together, have an opportunity to discuss what they think will be a satisfactory answer versus a less satisfactory answer. And then that they all have an opportunity to really openly discuss their opinions of the candidates after they've heard them interview. So when you say advisory committees, I assume you mean what I'm calling screening committees. Is that correct? Yes. So, and then, you know, what I believe the screening committee should do is, you know, I've always felt that the person, except in a very few instances, so the appointing authority or the person filling the position should be a part of that screening committee. So, you know, they're involved in the conversation. You know, oftentimes there's one really strong candidate that comes out of it, in which case that appointing authority's decision becomes quite easy. Sometimes there are two or three that are roughly equal, in which case then, you know, I think that principal or director needs to do more work and say, okay, I'm going to do an additional round. I think it's going to be our top candidates, but, you know, I want to develop some more questions. I want to really look at the background references. You know, I may want to put together a different protocol that answers maybe some of the questions that came up in our discussion to help me separate the smaller group that we have left. You're welcome.
Tammy.
Please give us 2 examples of decisions you've had to make in the past 6 months that have proved to be good ones. What influenced your decisions? Why were they good decisions? And what alternatives did you consider?
Okay. So in the past 6 months, I would say 2 of the really strong decisions that I had made had to do with 2 central office hirings. We had to hire a new business manager and we had to hire a new curriculum director. They were good decisions because of the way the individuals have worked out in the positions. They hit the ground running. They immediately were able to build relationships with staff. They, you know, have become in a very short time key parts of the leadership team. I think what influenced those decisions are the process that I just described. So my screening committees for both of those were large. I would say between 15 and 20 people on each of the screening committees. representatives from all of the schools, representatives from different parent groups within the community, representatives from the administration, of course. And we spent our time in those searches. I would say that, you know, the process we did for each of those searches was probably, in terms of time and in terms of interviews, similar to the amount of time that you're putting into this search. So we involved a lot of people. We got clarity on what we were looking for in candidates. We developed a process that was as free from bias as possible. We heard stakeholders from diverse groups, and we were able to really land on good, strong candidates that have been an asset to the district. You're welcome.
Nancy.
Hi. How would you ascertain the public's perception of the school system, and what steps will you take to improve the perception?
The only way to know is to ask. We do a lot of survey research in our district on people's perceptions of the schools. We have sort of one big survey that's part of our district improvement plan. It's one of the metrics. We do that on an annual basis. And so we're looking for changes and some key indicators around perception. Things that we're looking for particularly are changes in the percentage of caregivers who think that we're very responsive to concerns they present, and a reduction in those who think we're very unresponsive to concerns they present. Also looking for increases in the numbers of folks who feel that we have strong policies in place to respond to issues when they're raised. So we do that on an ongoing basis. We have targets that we're trying to hit. We have strategies that we're implementing to try to support movement in that direction. So for example, I don't know if you had seen any of the videos that were connected to the link in my letter of interest, but I have a podcast series that I'm doing with students right now on the district's anti-bias policies, because one of the things that we found from the survey is the community is not so sure what our practice is to respond to a bias incident. And so, you know, we have all these policies, very similar to the policies you have, I'm sure, but they're not necessarily well known among students or well known among parents. And so one of the ways we're trying to address that is through this podcast series. You know, having students on, I think, is key, because they are, you know, much more photogenic and active on social media than I am. So they're getting their peers to watch, and parents to watch, and the parent groups to watch. And so my hope is that through that effort, we'll see a change in that one. But really, I think the process is making sure that you have some way of gathering information about the things that you think are important, and then developing some plan to address what you see as the deficiencies. I'll say another thing we're changing is how we gather that input, because one of the things we found was it was almost 100% response rate first time we did it from students on their perceptions. From the parents, we got a very select subgroup that wasn't necessarily representative of the whole community. So this time when we're doing it, we're trying using what we call our talking point system, which is a system that allows parents to receive text communications from the schools in the language of their choice, because cultural thing, but I think younger families are more tuned in to text messages than to email messages. So hopefully that will help us get a demographic of younger parents. And hopefully the fact that, you know, the message is going out in not just Spanish and English, but in whatever language you want to hear it, will help us draw a more representative group this time. And then we'll look at that. We'll see where we think we are in terms of any improvements we've made or any new areas that might show up as things we need to improve. And that'll become the next iteration of trying to improve perceptions of the schools. You're welcome.
Lonnie.
Good evening. How would you participate in local civic organizations and community relations development?
Well, the first goal of any new superintendent is relationship building. There's this process that whoever you pick will use called the entry plan process. And that's basically about getting to know the people in the community and starting to build relationships with them. So for me, and I'm sure for the others as well, that process means using your first several months just to have meetings with people, just to get to know folks. I like to structure it around a protocol of a few questions. I like to structure it around questions that are strengths-based, like what do you think is working really well in this district? What do you think the strengths of this district are? And hearing from a variety of people about that. So in terms of superintendent's outreach first, you know, the key individuals are the other elected officials within the community. So that, you know, personal invitation would go out to all of them. And then from there, building to the other organizations. One area that I think would be high on my list if I was to be the successful candidate are potential community partners for innovation pathways. I know Mr. King has a couple of things that are in an almost ready to go space for potential innovation pathways, and they would need some formal connections with business partners. And so, you know, I'd also target those as sort of high up on the list. But really everything a superintendent does is done through relationships. And so the first part of the work is doing exactly what you're talking about. And the only way I know to build the relationships is to put in time into building the relationships.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Elaine.
Hi there.
Hi.
How would you expect to be evaluated as the superintendent? On what measurements would you expect to be graded after 1 year or at 2 years or 3 years? When would be a fair point to evaluate your performance as a superintendent?
So if you go on the superintendent evaluation page of the Department of Education, you'll see a series of 5 videos on superintendent evaluation. I am in 2 of the 5. So it's a topic that I'm very familiar with. I believe that for someone like me, using the new superintendent model makes the most sense. That's for experienced superintendents. I have finishing my 11th year as a superintendent, so I think that counts. And so basically what that looks like is it puts superintendents on a 2-year cycle like all the rest of the educators in the district. In terms of when would be a fair time to evaluate, the way I see that cycle working is, well, it's a 5-part process. It starts with goal setting. Then there is a formative assessment partway through. And then there's a summative assessment at the end. The other 2 parts have to do with self-reflection and evaluation. But basically, those are the 3 parts where there's sort of connection to someone else in terms of evaluations. And I think a new superintendent in the district has to be on kind of a different cycle in the beginning because of the answer to the last question. So what my process has been in other districts, and this will be my 3rd district as superintendent, is that entry plan process is basically the work of July to January. Then in February, I'd like to present a report to the school committee what my entry findings are. And then, you know, from there can start to set more specific goals. You know, if it was, I mean, the only other option is to say, okay, we could start the cycle at the, you know, the beginning in July, but then I'd say, okay, well, my goal is to do the entry plan, and, you know, that becomes a little bit less of a robust goal because it's sort of a, yeah, you did it or no, you didn't do it when it comes around. But if you can dig in, then, or if you can give me that grace, then you can dig into some more, I think, meaningful goals. And I think it could connect to some other things in the district. As I looked at your strategic plans, it appeared that they're kind of coming to a close and at the end of this year. Is that correct? So you're going to need a new strategic plan. What I've done in other districts, including Northampton, is use my entry plan as a way of sort of kickstarting the next strategic plan, because at the end, you'll have all these findings. They'll be very fresh findings. There'll be findings that involve other reports that have been provided by the Department of Education and other folks, but you'll also have very contemporaneous data from your staff, your students, your caregivers that you can then feed into, okay, well, where do we want to set our next objectives? So there could be a nice connection there. When I entered Northampton, they were in a very similar situation with an expiring district improvement plan. And what we did was entry findings around January, February. We did a little bit more root cause analysis. And then by the end of the year, we wrote a strategic plan based on the work that was done in the entry process. So I would say if I'm the person and if that is a process that seems to make sense to this committee, then, you know, it would sort of offset when the evaluation could begin, because a lot of the things that I'd be doing, instead of, all right, I've been here several years, I can develop new goals in, you know, a few days. It'll be a several month process to develop goals. You're welcome.
Mitch, would you follow up with Carlos?
I'll ask you to build on that. How would you measure your own success after 1 year and after 2 years?
I would measure my success in terms of how well I understand what's happening in the district and how strong my relationships are and how widely dispersed the relationships I have with individuals in the district are. Any school district is a very complex organization. As I've said earlier, there is some very important work happening here, and it's, in order to support it, it's important for me to understand it. I would suspect, based on my experience in every other district, that work is understood slightly differently in different places by different people and at different levels. And it's important for me to hear all those perspectives in order to really get a sense of where we are on the different things that we're trying to do. And at the same time that you're having those conversations and you're inviting people into discussion, you're building the relationships. So if I've done this well, in 1 year, I understand the strengths of the district and the needs of the district well enough that I'm able to help guide a process that leads to another strategic improvement plan that's going to help move the work of the district forward. And I have a cadre of people in the district that I can call on for support because we've grown to know each other over the course of the year. After 2 years, then I'd be looking at, okay, so how successful have we been in implementing the strategic plan, or the district improvement plans, what I like to call it, that we've developed as a group. And I noticed that in the district right now, there are many structures to support that work. You know, I saw that, you know, a lot of subcommittees that are working on that. So I imagine they would be very, you know, key informants in trying to help me get up to speed quickly in what's happening. And also key informants to tell me about who I should be connecting with in the schools to make sure that I understand the work that's underway.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
TJ.
Please discuss your experience with regional schools, particularly the relationship between or among the towns, the balancing of various needs and views, and the tensions that can result, particularly around budgeting.
Sure. So this would be my first experience with a regional district. As I mentioned, however, I think there are a lot of skills and dynamics that are not necessarily, are a lot of skills and dynamics within a municipal district that are generalizable. So a city isn't a monolith. There are parts of the city that have different relationships, I would say, with the district and different relationships with the city as a whole. And there's always this concern within even a municipal district, if it has more than one school, of making sure that people from all parts of town are being treated fairly. And to me, you know, the comparable challenge in a regional district is making sure that the towns, the people of both towns feel like they're being treated fairly, especially when there's a large population difference between the communities as there is here. And for me, that comes back to fairness. And so just to describe a little bit more about what I mean about generalizability. Now, I've already told the story about the one school that was maybe going to be closed and what happened there. When I came to Northampton, there were extreme variations between the level of support that were being provided to the 4 elementary schools, each located in different communities within Northampton. And that really was a challenge for morale. It was a challenge for collaboration. It was something that had, you know, some historical pieces that made people from and staff from some parts of town feel like they were more favored than staff and families from other parts of town. And the way I addressed that was by making sure that all of the elementary schools had similar resources and similar programs in place. And so, you know, it took us a while to get there because I decided that I didn't want to do that by slashing any of the schools that were sort of with higher resources. So I said, well, we'll hold you harmless, but we need to catch everyone else up. So for several budget cycles, resources were directed at those communities where, or those schools where there wasn't the same level of support historically. This year, we finally did it. Another reason why I think, you know, sort of reached a culmination of the work in Northampton. We actually got to an equalized per pupil, what I call purchase services and supplies for all of the elementary schools. So it's all equal. It's based on student population. Next year, our plan is going to be to sort of deliberately unbalance it and to give schools that have higher populations of high need students an increment. So we have to figure out how to do that. But that process of bringing everyone together financially has really allowed staff to work between schools because they're not seen as being competition with each other for resources anymore. It has reassured families that wherever they happen to live, wherever their students reside in the city, they're going to go to a good school. I can tell that from the interdistrict choice program we have. We have an interdistrict choice just like you do. And it's not really going in any particular direction right now. It's a few students at one school, a few students in another school, a few students in another school, mainly based on work routes and, you know, where it would be easiest to drop students off, sometimes based on siblings or other experience. But that piece has helped to create sense of fairness. So I think in regional 2 community district, that same kind of philosophy would be really important to assure staff, ensure the townspeople, whichever town it is, it's going to be a good school. You know, you're going to have similar levels of support. You're going to have the same curriculum. You're going to have the same learning experiences. When it's time for you to come together at middle school, you're going to have everything you need and will be just as well off as students who happen to attend a different elementary school.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Laura.
What is your experience with budget development, including developing relationships with town government in regards to maintaining financial partnerships?
So I've always worked very closely with both the mayor and chief financial officer for the city. We have the type of relationship where either one of them can show up in my office unannounced. I can show up in either one of their offices unannounced. We talk about financial matters all the time, very transparently, very openly, very collaboratively. In terms of my process for budget, very hands-on with developing the budget. You know, I've developed 11 budgets as superintendent. Prior to that, I was responsible for very large chunks of budgets as a student services director. So, you know, I had 1,500 kids and, you know, about $7 million of a budget when I was a special ed director in Holyoke. When I was in Agawam, I had about 700 kids and about $6 or $7 million of a budget that I was managing. And then, of course, for the last 8 years in Holyoke, in Northampton rather, it's been the entire $40 million budget. My process for it is to sort of work your way backward from whatever the statutory requirements of your community are. So in Northampton, the charter says budget needs to be passed by the school committee by April 15th. So working off that, I say if the school committee needs to pass the budget by April 15th, I need to be communicating to the school committee by about the end of February around what I call a first view budget, which is a conceptual budget. It looks at some of the big trends within finances, sort of what we see as fixed cost increases for the budget, what we see, what we've received as financial guidance from the city, and then what we identify as our needs that we want to try to make a change in this upcoming budget. So if the fixed cost increases are less than the financial guidance we have, we start, you know, using that money to address the priorities. If it's the opposite situation, if it's there are fixed cost increases are greater than the increases we're expecting, we still try to address the priorities, and we do that by reprogramming funds. So in, you know, the 8 budgets that I've had in Northampton, there's been about $10 million of additional budget growth, of increased support from the city. I would say there's also been about 5 to 10 million of reprogramming resources within the existing budget. So it looks very different than it was 8 years ago. So anyways, that's what's in the first view budget. And I just asked the school committee for some sort of directional guidance. Like, does this make sense? Is it something you can support? If I get this sense from the committee that they're going to be supportive of it, we then move on to the development of the budget books, which it usually follows up another couple of weeks later where people can see detail. In between, I'm repeating the process that I did with the school committee with other groups. So main groups that I do in a municipal setup are the school councils. So I like to do a joint school council meeting where we do the same basic presentation and I get feedback from them. Of course, the presentation has been online now for several weeks, so we're getting feedback on that. And then when the budget book is presented, I say, okay, here's the budget books. It's either exactly the same as I had described this a few weeks ago, or there have been some changes based on feedback we've gotten from the community, or we've gotten some feedback from the community. We've decided that we don't want to make the changes, so we want to explain why we think these things are important and why we're keeping them in the budget. And then it goes, so then they have the books. Then school committee members have 2 weeks to review the budget detail, and then we do the vote for the budget at the next school committee meeting 2 weeks after that. After that, the budget goes to city council, at which case I do a sort of very truncated version of that for city council. As sure you know, city council can't increase the budget. They could reduce the budget. That's never happened in the time I've been there. But I basically go through sort of the highlights. Here's what's in the budget. Here's what's new. Here's why it's important. Please support the mayor's overall budget, which includes the budget for the schools.
Elaine.
The roles and responsibilities of the school committee and the superintendent are sometimes clear and sometimes ambiguous. For example, budget approval versus budget implementation, personal policy and finance versus personnel administration, or even dealing with parents and teachers with concerns or complaints. Please describe a situation where these roles and responsibilities have challenged you and how you would work to address them as our superintendent.
The three you gave were budget, personnel, and what was the third?
Finance.
Okay, what was parent?
Personal policy and finance versus personnel administration. Budget approval versus budget implementation.
Okay, and a place where that's been a challenge. So I think that the budget is a guess of where you're going to be 18 months down the road, right? If I'm starting to develop it in January so I can present it in February, one thing I can tell you for sure is it's not going to land where I built it. So I think that sometimes there's a challenge, especially when there are folks who may be new to the role of school committee, of understanding how you get variances in the budget. Personnel come in at different rates than you expected them to be. Emergency maintenance comes up that you didn't anticipate. Students move into the district that may require needs that you didn't anticipate at the time. And all of those, I think, can be a little bit confusing for school committee to understand, because they're like, well, we approved your budget, we supported it, this is what you said you need, why is it changing now? And so the way I try to deal with that is just by making sure that all the variances are known and that all of the important transfers are discussed. So what we do, and I'm sure it's probably your practice here as well, is we do monthly budget update as part of the business manager's report at the school committee agenda. That as a part of that, you get a budget detail that shows you where you have excesses and deficiencies. We say, you know, if we think any of them are problematic, and invite school committee members to talk about if they think any of them are problematic. And then we make transfers as needed as it comes to the end of the year to cover any deficits. I think that, you know, you asked about a question where it comes up, and so, or a problem where that comes up. So I remember having a conversation with a school committee member about, okay, so, you know, why does that happen though? Why is the budget as implemented, why is it different than the budget that we actually approved? And why do we have to do transfers every month? And so, you know, for me, the way to resolve that is just through education and say, okay, so this is what happened. You know, you get a personnel report every month. People leave the district, people enter the district. They don't come into the district at the same, you know, their placements don't come at the same salary that people left with. And that causes changes. Sometimes we thought we were going to need things that we end up not needing. So we don't end up spending that money. We save it for other unanticipated needs. And I think it's really a problem that it is best addressed through education. I think as long as people can see that you're bringing forward transparent information on a monthly basis, that you're talking about where you need the transfers to go, and that you're trustworthy about it, you can get through that. Now, in our district, as a municipal district, We don't have the ability to carry excess and deficiency. Basically, any unspent and spent funds that we have at the end of the year would go back to the general fund of the city. And so we actually have a policy that we developed during my time, which says in June, there will be a vote of the school committee to waive their, their requirement to approve transfers and to give the superintendent authority to make any transfers needed to close the books, which when you think about it, is pretty awesome authority. I mean, there's millions of dollars left in that budget at the end of the year that we're making transfers around. But because we've been transparent, because we've been having conversations about the budget all through the year, my committee's always been comfortable doing that. And it's many different people. I've had 26 different school committee members in the 8 years I've been there. And that process is always held up no matter who's been sitting in the seat, because we've established credibility around the budget. You're welcome.
Thank you. That actually concludes the question and answering period this evening. So if you would like to offer a closing statement, you certainly may now.
Sure. So I think I would just want to talk a little bit more about appreciative inquiry, strengths-based approach. I mentioned that a few times in my answers tonight. And one of the things that I would like to bring to the district, and it's sort of something that I work in my own practice right now, is what's known as the 6 freedoms. And those are the freedom to be seen is number 1. This gets to a lot of the questions you asked tonight about relationships. It's very important for people in the district to know that they're seen by the superintendent and seen by someone else. We actually have a protocol in our district around this. It's called I see you. We encourage people, instead of saying, hello, hi, how's it going, to say, I see you. I see what you're going through. And that's a practice that comes from leading together. It's actually a practice that's borrowed from some indigenous cultures, where the belief is if someone doesn't see you in a whole day, then you never really came into existence for that day. And to make sure that we don't have a day where any student, any staff member, any administrator feels like they weren't seen by somebody. The second freedom is the freedom to be heard. We also have, within Leading Together, relationship building practice called Turn and Listen, where we do a very deliberate protocol with staff, teaching them how to listen to each other. It's a 5-minute exercise where people have 2 minutes of being listened to with a partner, 2 minutes of listening to the partner, and then 1 minute to debrief. We give very specific instructions for it. We say, don't active listen. Don't think about what you're going to say. Don't, do anything to either support or reject what the person is saying. Just listen. And then we debrief it. And the experience of that has been so powerful every time I've done it. Basically, 2 insights come out. One is how great it was to be listened to for 2 minutes in a day, how long it's been since anyone's really had that experience. And 2, how hard it is to listen to someone for 2 minutes, which is why it's such a rare experience for people. Third is the freedom to dream in community. I think you've heard in my discussion of developing strategic action plans and developing screening committees. It's all about community and working together and creating safe spaces where people can really share what's on their mind. The next is the freedom to choose to contribute, which again comes from the Leading Together work. One of our mottos is it's an invitation, not a demand. And so we invite people to share the best of themselves. Does someone have an idea about how to make this district better? It may not be in the strategic plan or the district improvement plan, but do you have a passion that you think you could do something with that could make a difference in the lives of some kids? Creating that opportunity always present for people to offer the best of themselves. The next is the freedom to act with support, meaning if you take a chance to do something, you're not going to be standing out there by yourself. Even if it doesn't go right, there'll be a partner there for you, whether it be an administrator or another teacher, but someone who's paying attention to you, someone who's providing resources, someone who you can communicate with about how things are going. And the last one, which I think may be most important in the current context we're in, which is the freedom to be positive. And I sincerely have worries about the status of education as a profession and the status of educators as individuals. Across the country, there are so many people who are feeling tremendously overwhelmed, tremendously under stress, and have gotten into very negative patterns of thinking and feeling. And so flipping that around, just being positive, I think, can be a revolutionary act in these times. So abandoning sort of deficit thinking, abandoning the idea that we always have to focus on how bad things are in COVID, but really being brave enough to be positive. These are things that I think will help any district improve. They're things that have been part of my efforts to build adult culture in my district. And if you will trust me with trying to keep the success story going in your district, what I'd like to bring here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So what we'll do is we'll take a brief break, just so if you want to stretch, enjoy the buffet over there, et cetera, for a few minutes, and then we'll begin the deliberation phase. All right, we're ready to move into the deliberation phase. It is a publicly viewable portion. This is not done in executive session, so what you are seeing now is actually happening. Of course it is. But AOT, I forgot to tell you at the start, and this is probably, not germane to anything, but I'm supposed to announce that it'll be recorded for future playback, but I have since found out AOTV is actually playing it live right now. So again, this is what my hope and my plan is for the rest of this evening, is to open it up for the folks who went to the site visits to give a kind of a synopsis report. And then any other committee member wishes to address the process, et cetera, and then move into some sort of a vote process. If there's a motion after I would like to have the committee have the opportunity to speak, and then move into the motion portion to see where we go from there. So I'm not opposed to whoever, I mean, we can just go down to Mitch. You visited Northampton, so feel free.
Here we go. Prior to beginning my review, some background. I visited Northampton Public Schools, the district of Dr. John Provost, last week. Over 6 hours, I met for about an hour each with groups of administrators, teachers, instructional coaches, town officials, and parents or caregivers. I asked questions on areas including leadership style, personal experiences working with Dr. Provost, budgeting, resolution of issues that arise in any district, improving academic performance, handling any parent complaints, working with staff, providing professional development, and forging good relationships with the community, the school committee, unions, and staff members. This review is just over 10 minutes in length, but every time I thought about cutting something else, I thought to myself, no, this comment will mean a lot to Lonnie, or Ted, or Nancy, or this is a subject that Elaine, or Tammy, or Carla, or Lee is really invested in. Okay, if you have to, start your timers now. The 29 individuals whom I interviewed see Dr. Provost as an absolutely extraordinary superintendent, a man of the highest possible integrity, someone who is incredibly intelligent, who has strong core values, and whose work in education aligns with those values. They see him as a kind and compassionate person who truly cares about students, their families, and district staff. He actively solicits input from others and listens carefully to all points of view from his administrative team, school committee members, teachers, and caregivers. He seriously takes their views into consideration when making a decision, but then consistently makes that decision based on the best interest of the children. The following, are some of the comments made by individuals which were often repeated in one form or another by many others as the day progressed. He is clear, open, and honest. He acts as a mentor to me. He is collaborative and accessible. He has weekly meetings with us to go over our concerns. He is concise and to the point. He is available to us at any time, day or night. He spends lots of time in district schools and attending school events. He cares about our input. He visits classrooms with principals and focuses on instructional practices. His building walkthroughs are like a coaching experience. He says, so what would you tell that teacher? What are some good things you saw? Do you have any suggestions? He's incredibly smart and he totally gets it. He constantly offers support and insight. He elicits feedback from the school community, processes that feedback, and comes up with a plan. He's a servant leader, focusing on the well-being and growth of his staff. He has emotional intelligence and empathy. He's able to ascertain and understand what people are feeling, and he can delve into different levels. He knows my staff in my school even better than I know them. He frequently says, you need to think about how this decision will impact people. His only weakness is that he's a Yankee fan. It's really a collaborative budget process. He meets with the school councils to review data and priorities. He models integrity, caring, and compassion in the budget and budget process, which he totally understands. There were inequities in the processes of the two schools of the 4 schools before John's arrival here. Now there is so much alignment. Our schools are now collaborators. He is so wise and inspiring as a leader that he unified us all. So now we have a strong leadership team. A town official noted that he advocates for educational growth within the budget, but also focuses on keeping the budget stable. He is endlessly patient with the school community in presenting information to them and modifying it when administrators express a need for their students. You won't find a stronger superintendent than John Provost. He is inspiring and compassionate. He answers all questions fully and honestly, even challenging questions. He's a data-driven guy, and he really thinks through the implications of the data. Because of him, we never take a road without talking about our vision, our hopes and dreams. He has high expectations of himself. He raises the bar for others because he models professionalism and integrity. His priority is always kids. I remember him calling a home when the child lost a grandparent. He really cares about us and our families. He is a rock of support when trauma hits a family. He gives supportive guidance when a principal has an issue with an employee. John had an entry plan when he came into the district. That plan and the district's improvement plan really helped to provide the direction the district would go in. There is a very collegial and respectful relationship between John and his staff. He's very approachable. He respects and listens to the professional expertise of the staff regarding curriculum or setting up a student support group, for example. He's acutely aware of social emotional concerns. If a social worker tells him that they need something for a school, he defers to her and her knowledge and experience. He leverages all our strengths. Before he came, our classes were much more of a pull-out model, but he moved us to a more inclusive model. He has always been very supportive. He has invested in best practices. We established a social emotional screening program, and then when COVID hit, we were able to get immediate results. What would Athol-Royalston parents, teachers, administrators say 5 years down the road about hiring Dr. Provost? The answer was always, best decision we ever made. We were remarkably fortunate to get him. Look at all he's done. How can we get him to sign on for another 3 years? Regarding his relationship with the school committee, several people I talked to know that he is always professional and courteous. The town consists both of people who have lived here for all of their lives, as well as newcomers. That provides for a real diversity of opinions. John and his work are really respected by the members of the school committee, but sometimes they say, well, we really like this, but what about this? He always listens carefully to the school committee and to parents. If there's any pushback on any of his ideas, he always deals with that in a very professional way. He really does care. He is very welcoming. He's a good, kind, caring human being. One person said that post-COVID, some people can be unkind, and that it's hard for him to reconcile that in his mind. His intentions are always good. We have had real growth in our district. We have a new phonics and word recognition program. Our school system is so much more inclusive now. The whole way of doing things is more collaborative. He's extremely humble. Several people from different groups said that it's remarkable that he is not ego-driven at all, but is motivated by the kids. He is amazing with budgets and always makes it work for the kids. He pushes the district forward. He is a humanitarian. He feels he has to go where there is a need. He is very smart and logical. He believes in rolling up his sleeves and getting to work. He tells us just as it is. He's so honest. In the most gentle way, he gets things done. His relationship with the union, actually 6 different unions, is always professional as well. Dealing with a union and negotiating contracts can be challenging at times, sometimes collaborative and sometimes somewhat confrontational, yet he is always respectful, and union members feel that they have been heard and they are respected. He is aware of past practice and does needed research in order to be consistent. He has the patience of Job in dealing with various union groups who change leadership and agendas every 2 years. He is consistent, clear, and responds to the concerns of the union. He made skillful use of ESSER funds. For example, Dr. Provost was successful when he was approached with the idea of securing doctoral level interns from the UMass School of Psychology to do testing. We had 5 superintendents in 7 years before Dr. Provost came. Dr. Provost stabilized things in the district. He unified the schools and worked skillfully to accomplish a great deal with assessments, equity, and school culture. He navigated complexities really well among a wide variety of stakeholders. He is really good at finding common ground with others. He has a personality and a temperament that allows him to stay calm and professional and to never get ruffled. He has a real sense of purpose. He is totally devoted to the schools and their children. The school district has a great reputation throughout the region, thanks to him, and he will be really hard to replace. They understand his wanting new challenges, but with his departure, the district will be diminished. The mayor said that she has seen an evenness in his approach that has resulted in his moving the district forward, giving all children equal opportunities. He believes in educating each child to their full possibilities. It's sad to think about losing him. Other town officials noted that he's an excellent problem solver. He listens carefully and he looks to find a solution that is best for kids. He's very good with building relationships. He empowers principals and demands a lot from administrators. We have had great improvement in academic areas. He is an active listener and takes everyone's advice into consideration. But when he makes a decision, he owns it. John does all for the good of children, no matter what the politics. Dr. Provost understands parent perspectives. He responds directly, quickly, and professionally to parents. He is very visible and understands the importance of and commitment to community. The 4 parents I interviewed said the following: Dr. Provost always says yes to appointments. The fact that he was a special education director before coming to Northampton was really beneficial. The arts flourished under John at the high school. For example, music, drama, and a woodworking program at the high school. This school district under Dr. Provost has been so supportive of my child's social emotional needs. I am in awe of his dedication to families and to children. Dr. Provost has helped build a culture where when a problem arises in a school, they get together and say, let's see what the problem is so we can work this out. The kids build skills that they can apply to different situations. They develop life skills and personal skills, whole child skills. I think the world of him. He is an honorable man. He never stops learning. He is constantly working to improve his practice. He works hard to be the voice of those whom he represents, but who may not be at the table. The process is important to John. He successfully suggested a mediator for resolving a problem between 2 parents. He is remarkably patient with all individuals and groups. He has a real growth mindset for adults and fights hard for good professional development. He constantly asks, how can everyone equally access education? We've all made a lot of progress on ELL and set up an ELL advisory committee. We also now have instituted a family engagement team. John consistently conveys the idea that I'm here because this matters to me. Dr. Provost consistently goes above and beyond, even on the weekends. Finally, I also had a great introduction to 2 programs that Dr. Provost was instrumental in setting up: an IT pathway, which is currently in full operation, and a healthcare and social assistance pathway, which is about to get underway. The students make a decision to pursue this pathway, generally by the end of 9th grade, and then take special courses, including higher education courses for college and internships over the next 3 years to prepare them for careers in IT, social work, public health, certified nursing assistant, or mental health. My day in Northampton revealed Dr. Provost to be an absolutely extraordinary educator and an exceptional potential superintendent for the Athol-Royalston schools. Thank you.
Thank you. I did the site visit for Dr. Cynthia Kennedy here within our own district. I had the opportunity to meet with roughly 20 administrators, teachers, and parents within our district. And the way I have my notes written are going to be based on the 5 meetings that I facilitated. So the overall theme from all parties in the first meeting is that Dr. Kennedy is a tremendous educator who empowers, supports, and collaborates with her peers and subordinates. She's an excellent motivator, follows through on what she says she will do, listens before reacting, and works alongside of you instead of dictating, and that she was a true instructional leader. Dr. Kennedy truly understands early childhood education, which they all felt is unique to a superintendent. It truly encourages and is a problem solver. She listens to any and all voices in the room and admits when she's wrong. When asked about a potential weakness, all agreed that Dr. Kennedy often takes on many roles, and this could be seen as a negative as she has a very full plate. They also spoke of the important role Dr. Kennedy has played in their own successes and development and how impactful she has been as a mentor. Dr. Kennedy has played a critical role in helping maintain the morale of those that work for her and understands when people need support. Whether working in the central office or sitting on the floor reading to a class, Dr. Kennedy is an all-in type of administrator. Her visibility to everyone, including students, has been positive and well received. Those in attendance felt strongly that Dr. Kennedy would transition into a superintendent's role seamlessly. It was also noted by the group that they felt Dr. Kennedy was made to be a superintendent. Through her extensive education, knowledge, research, and willingness to continue to learn, she will make a great superintendent for any school district. At that point in time, I moved on to my second meeting. We started the meeting talking about the different capacities each has had the opportunity to work with Dr. Kennedy. It was noted that Dr. Kennedy has worked extensively with our business manager regarding budgets and grant writing. It was noted that Dr. Kennedy is an influential grant writer who has successfully brought in a significant amount of funds to the district. It was also noted that she has been involved in a fair amount of our budget-related topics, and she even manages portions of our budget already. So our knowledge and understanding about regional school district budgeting has grown. It was discussed that Dr. Kennedy advocates in an equitable way for all student groups, including but not limited to special needs students, average learners, and advanced learners. The implementation and education surrounding appropriate CST and PBIS initiatives is viewed as one of Dr. Kennedy's greatest accomplishments within the district. She truly has evolved the district's way of managing these processes, and all of the students in the district benefit greatly from this, and her continued ability to educate teachers on these topics would benefit teachers and students. Dr. Kennedy is a highly visible administrator who makes it a point to be seen by students and values the time she spends with every student, even if just passing in the hall. Dr. Kennedy is a supportive colleague who is an invaluable resource and has a wealth of information and access to many contexts, which has benefited the district greatly. Again, people at the table stated that their strong support for Dr. Kennedy from the lens of a colleague or subordinate as someone who has helped facilitate growth in others and is an empowering instructional leader to her peers. It was also noted that Dr. Kennedy is never afraid to roll up her sleeves and jump right in on any task that is necessary. From lunch duty to assisting with facilities management and projects, she's always someone that you can count on. Overall, everyone at the table felt the next natural professional step for Dr. Kennedy is to move into a superintendent role. My next meeting, many of the previously stated qualities were mentioned and discussed. Additional feedback gained was primarily in the scope of parent interactions and her ability to diffuse tough situations and her willingness to listen to parents' concerns. She has a way of problem solving that is very effective and is a very solution-based educator and administrator. Even when having to deliver bad news, she's able to do so in a way that is not demeaning and rather a let's work together to solve this approach, which has been very well received. A weakness that Dr. Kennedy has is that she's often intimidating at first. Sometimes this is a deterrent to people who then never really have the opportunity to get to know her. Those that do get to know her realize quickly that she is a straight shooter who outlines expectations clearly and is a process-driven administrator, and while intimidating at first, is appreciated in the long run. Once you get to know this about Dr. Kennedy, it is also very clear that she is one of the most supportive colleagues and administrators to work with and for. All at the table felt strongly that Dr. Kennedy's transition from her current administrative role to that of a superintendent would be the next natural step in her progression, and she will serve any school district very well. Moving on to my next meeting, in addition to the many of the previously mentioned qualities, some additional highlights that were not spoken about include Dr. Kennedy's ability to foster relationships with building principals in a way that gives principals the autonomy that is needed and required for them to run their own buildings. Dr. Kennedy effectively communicates what the expectations are, then allows the building administration to do their jobs to maintain those expectations. From the perspective of a principal, this is very well received and appreciated. It was mentioned that this philosophy would also benefit Dr. Kennedy in a superintendent role, as she would be able to focus more on the important duties of a superintendent while being able to lean on her administrative team effectively. It was noted that Dr. Kennedy is not afraid to address issues when she sees them and does so in a way that leads to positive outcomes. Dr. Kennedy is an advocate for the district and often seeks out funds through grants to help provide resources that are needed. An example of this in our district, at the high school, there was a need for a social worker position that the district did not have funding for. Dr. Kennedy listened to what the needs were and quickly acted on filling the position through grant funding that she was able to secure. Additionally, Dr. Kennedy has had an influential role in working with the high school to create pathway and dual enrollment programs for high school students who seek to have access to college credit courses prior to graduation. These initiatives are providing students with the opportunity to take classes for college credit at no expense to them. She is a creative budget manager who understands the complexities of regional school district budgeting and the constraints that it may have. During my final meeting of the day, many of the same statements were validated in regards to overall qualities and leadership styles. In addition, it was noted that Dr. Kennedy is always first and oftentimes the only central office administrator to jump in and help when needed in buildings across the district. Specific examples were given about a time when a principal was out for an extended period of time and Dr. Kennedy stepped right in without being asked to help support the assistant principals in the building. Her overall presence during this time was appreciated by staff and was seen as one of the greatest support systems. It was also stated that Dr. Kennedy has a wealth of knowledge and is a great resource and a strong advocate for all students and helps identify areas of growth in teachers and administrators to ensure continued improvement and success in schools. As an instructional leader, Dr. Kennedy is continuously working to improve the learning experience and outcomes for students in the district. They noted that they feel that Dr. Kennedy has had the experience to see and learn what is working within our district and knows what needs to be done differently to improve the schools in Athol and Royalston. And this insight could be a valuable resource to our district. After these meetings, it was very clear why Dr. Kennedy had made the top 4, and given all of the ways that those who felt very strongly about her ability to lead, and the benefit of hiring within provides less of a learning curve in regards to knowing who we are and who we want to become as a district. Obviously, the disadvantage of hiring within is also there as well if the community is looking for a potential overhaul in our school system. Overall, I would say it was very clear as to why she was in our top 4.
Thank you. Tammy.
Good evening, everyone. I had the privilege of meeting with Matt Erhenworth, who is here this evening with us for a school visit last Friday. I spent about almost 9 hours there in the school. I met with a total of about 30 members of the district. I just want to highlight some of the departments that I met with. 6 members of his central office staff, 5 instructional leaders, 3 of which were union reps, an elementary coach, a negotiations committee member, 6 members of their operational leadership team, all 5 building principals, school committee members, both past and present, and community leaders. There were 6 total, including the state representative himself. Michael Soter came in and spoke on his behalf because his chief could not be there that day, and he actually showed up. He is the 8th district representative for the state. While meeting with each group, there was an overarching theme in each session. Matt was consistently described as an excellent communicator, responsive, professional, dedicated, knowledgeable, having unrivaled business office knowledge, specifically around budgets and finance, trusted, calm, kind, supportive, thorough, and fair. Most impressive to me was the rapport among the building personnel, both union and non-union. The principals in the building state that Matt is instrumental to their success. He allows for autonomy, which makes the staff feel trusted and supported. The group gave specific examples of his ability to jump in and de-escalate intense interactions with a parent who was threatening a building principal. He stepped in between the two, calmed the situation, and most importantly to him, he made his staff feel safe. What they liked best about Matt is his ability to provide support to help them grow as professional leaders. In addition, Matt offers his knowledge to the staff in form of mentoring new or promoted employees. You heard this evening about how he is currently mentoring the gentleman who is now the director of facilities. I think it's important to understand that Matt took that under his wing and is making sure that someone within the district is valued. And I think that that was an important leadership skill that Matt brought, was able to identify who in the district needed the leadership skills and how to get them that. Amongst the meetings, I met with the Unit A president and vice president and Unit C president, and they said that Matt was easy to work with, and he goes above and beyond to explain the details during negotiations. His ability to effectively communicate information, more specifically around this particular negotiations was around health insurance, helped move them to their contract faster without the need for intervention. Prior to Matt working in this district, the negotiations were often stagnant and sent to mediation. The community leaders and the school committee members say that Matt is a natural leader who is extremely collaborative on projects. They highlighted Matt's ability to bring together 2 towns that hadn't seen eye to eye in years past. They all agreed that Matt's mission was to provide the very best educational experience for children by keeping them as the focus of any of their work, all while strengthening community relationships with all stakeholders. It was abundantly clear that the staff did not want Matt to leave their district. it was said numerous times through every single meeting that they wish him the very best, but they are very sad to see him go. My last meeting of the day was with the current superintendent, Dr. Jason DeFalco. Jason feels that Matt is exactly what our district needs based on his knowledge and experience as an assistant superintendent in a regional school district. He pointed out that Matt is the only candidate that has regional school experience as a superintendent, which is absolutely vital to understanding the complexities that come with a regional school district. He said that Matt is a very hands-on when it comes to work being done in the district. He is often looked to as the problem solver who is always available 24/7. He suggested that Matt participate in the new MASS new superintendent training program offered by the state. He also stated that regardless of our decision, Matt has a recent contract that doesn't expire until 2025, and the Blackstone Millville Regional School District would be ecstatic to keep him. Jason left me his card and his cell phone number for anyone who had questions about Matt's candidacy. My own personal note, Matt was extremely welcoming and open about the desire to be our superintendent. He feels our district is the best fit for him because he is intimately familiar with regional school districts and enjoys building community relationships, which is what we asked for in our search flyer. He is a resident of Rutland and he has 3 children in the public school system. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you. I will have Mitch at this time read the report from Carla regarding her visit to where.
Okay, thank you. Carla's asked me to read this report on Dr. Marlene DeLeo. Carla talked with students, teachers, central office administrators, principals, central office staff, town officials, and school committee, parents, program directors, police, and fire. All said the very same things in almost the same words. Very involved, always present at events and games, walks the halls and talks to people. Very approachable, always willing to talk with you, pays attention to everyone, always willing to listen, always there, said by multiple groups. Strong relationship to teachers, open door policy, listens, out of the box problem solver, communicates clearly, very straightforward, stands her ground, but able to change her mind when appropriate. Always focused on the benefit to kids. Multiple groups said that as well. Can make tough decisions, major efforts to support struggling kids, focus on academic, social, emotional outcomes. Big believer in data, but the focus is always on culture and community. The key is, are we putting decent people out into the world? Improving education, helped to develop and participates in Manufacturing Partnership Council, secured innovation pathway grants, brought in new career-focused programs, firefighter, EMT, CAN, Makerspace, works with local businesses on career pathways, secured a couple of override votes allowing for purchase of new equipments. Multiple groups said that. Implemented new standardized assessments across buildings. Test scores are up 15 to 50%. Attendance and graduation rates are up. Improving classroom instruction. Moving away from lectures towards kids moving around. Sharing ideas among staff members. Supportive of teachers. No high-level turnover. High expectations of teachers. Focused on putting kids first. Multiple groups said that. Middle school turnaround. Collaborative approach. Rebuilding trust of staff. Test scores have improved. Her management style, hands-on, involved, sets goals for tasks, gives teachers and staff autonomy in how they're carried out. Multiple groups said that. Stays on problem without micromanaging. Always asking, what do you need for support? Multiple groups said that. She's our leader. She trusts us to get it done. Here's an issue. How are we going to fix it? What are the best practices? Balances top-down and consensus leadership. knows everyone on top of everything, a true practitioner of site-based management. I trust her. She's extremely honest. Personal. She puts in 110%. Kind, supportive, approachable. Team includes everyone. Well-liked in community. Good relationships with town officials. On many committees, a great participant in the community. Sorry, let me rephrase that. She's on many committees and is a great participant in the community. The most interactive superintendent with town, with staff, with students that I've ever seen. Communication goes out to every family weekly, much more available than other superintendents. Goes to town hall, meets with people, needs-based budgets. District no longer funded at minimum level. I don't know anyone who can say a bad word about her. Anyone who gets her will be lucky. Hate to see her leave. She will hit the ground running. Thank you, Carla.
Thank you. At this time, are there any other school committee members that would like to interject anything at this point regarding the process, the candidates, et cetera?
There was a survey given. Will that be made public to the people viewing or here? with
Yes,
us today?
it's a public, I believe there were 71, yes, there were 71 respondents. And just so you know, let's see, it was broken down. Most people, it was set up to have one person rate one superintendent candidate. So there are, like I said, 71 respondents, and I think, let's see, 51 of 71 were staff in the district, 13 from parents and guardian, and 7 from various community members. Yeah, I'm not too sure I can read that. It's kind of, it's kind of small, yeah. So I will make that available publicly, whether it's via the school district website or, other various places. So Mitch.
I just wanted to point out about that the school committee members were in possession of that document for 24 to 36 hours prior to tonight's meeting.
Correct. Anybody else? Okay, I just want to just bring it around back to thanking people on the superintendent search committee. I was involved from the first emailing to me personally of the 19 applicants from Tracy. And then we made those available to the search committee. We narrowed that down to 8 semifinalists, with 1 not responding to a request for an interview scheduling. So we interviewed 7 semifinalists and then narrowed it down to 4. I do, this is Brittany asked me earlier about how many of these have I done. This is my 8th process. I think it was very transparent. It was, well-rounded. The committee members on the search committee took the time, they reviewed the materials, they asked a lot of questions. So I'm convinced that the 4 best candidates came out of that process, and we as a district are glad to have all 4 of them. Unfortunately, I realized that only 1 can move forward, but I want those 4 candidates to know that in my mind, they were all top candidates. So again, as we move forward to the end result, and again, I will just state so everybody's clear, the school district bylaws do dictate that we have 7 affirmative votes to hire the superintendent. So if there's a motion and it only gets 5 votes or it gets 6 votes, the motion fails. So again, the successful candidate that would be offered the position is the candidate that gets 7 or more affirmative votes. TJ, go ahead. It's, if nobody else from the committee has anything, I think that would be appropriate. Whoops, sorry, Mitch.
Yes, sorry, before a motion, I know you'd ask if people had something to say, and I would certainly encourage people to state what they feel is most important at this point. To me, we've made some real progress in the last few years. I'm eager to see someone who can continue their progress. I'm eager to see somebody who has the experience in the superintendent's role, or with, especially with instruction in the classroom, so that he or she can really hit the ground running, as opposed to hiring somebody who has to be in a learning mode for 2 or 3 years, while we have to wait for that person to really come up to speed in his or her qualifications. There's just so much involved, as you all know, in the superintendency. The person has to be a master in so many areas, and I think we need to look to those people who are most qualified to step in right from the start, and so there's no real learning curve.
TJ.
At this time, I'd like to make a motion that we offer the superintendent's positions to Matthew Erhenworth.
And just to go along with that, the wording should be motion to offer, your candidate happens to be, that you mentioned was Matthew Erhenworth, the position of superintendent of schools for the Athol-Royalston Regional School District, effective July 1st, pending successful contract negotiations.
Correct.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Discussion on the motion. Tammy.
If I may, I
You
second
may.
it because I think discussion between us is going to be important tonight and every day moving forward, that we work together. I understand what this community has been looking for, and I understand what we've been interviewing for. Mitch asked us to each say something about, you know, how we feel about the process, or how we feel about where we're moving, or why we're choosing a candidate. I need, as a parent first, to understand that the person who's sitting in that office is looking out for the best interest of our children, because that's why we appoint them in that position. In addition to that, I need someone who is a community builder, a relationship builder. And experience or not, you either have the desire to work hard and put the work in, or you don't. A comment that was made this evening by one of the candidates was a bit concerning to me, about coming in, seeing the work done, and wants to be part of what's going well here. I want somebody who's going to come in and take that work and not be part of it, but become it, and be there for our community, and be there for our teachers. And that is the reason why I am also in favor of Matt Erhenworth.
Brittany.
Tammy, I just have a question for you, since you did his site visit. His inexperience that he has in early education, what are your thoughts? Do you have from the greater, I know you gave a great synopsis, but that's something that our district really needs, somebody who's strong and knowledgeable. Do you feel that despite his own experience maybe not being there, do you feel that he has resources that he would rely on to help ensure that we continue to move forward with our early education programs?
I absolutely do. And it was a concern of mine walking into the district as well, talking about instructional leadership there. He currently does all of the instructional leadership work there already, and mentors and oversees the pre-K through 2 instruction. He works with the principals on a daily basis to make sure that those students are getting what they need. It's not in his resume, but he has been doing it for a very long time. It's not something that's new to him, but I understand that it's a concern here. None of his instructional leaders felt that he was lacking in that area, and that they felt that what he did give to them was constructive and moving the needle in the right direction. So I don't have any concerns. Of course, yes.
Mitch?
I have concerns. Very likable person. I think a hard worker. Could turn out for some school district in the future to be a good superintendent. I don't think that he's ready for the position at this time. I'm not convinced that he has the expertise in terms of instruction. It's not shown in his resume. I'm also concerned about a couple of his answers to questions. He said that in the question about hiring, that he needs to meet the finalists for every job in the schools. And that seems to be different from giving the principal real autonomy to select the candidate. That seems to be a lot of micromanaging. You hire your principal, you hire the best people possible, you hire people you believe in, and then you give them the autonomy, which is what the MASC does, to hire the people that they wish to hire. And the idea that he would say, well, you know, I have a concern about this person for this reason. Well, there is, again, a process, and you go through that process, and you trust your principal to hire those people. Naturally, central office people, the superintendent would have the authority there, but generally that wouldn't be the case with just teachers and paraprofessionals, et cetera, within a building. That was one area of concern. The second question I had, he said, you look for continuity from the people you hire. You don't want somebody who's jumping from one district to another. Well, I look at his resume and I see that that he was assistant principal at Fitchburg High School from 2005 to 2006, 1 year. Then he moved to assistant principal of operations in Marlborough for 3 years. Then he moved to principal of Leicester Middle School for 2 years. Then he moved to principal of the middle school in Norwood for 2 years. And now he's finally assistant superintendent for 4 years. So to me, looking at that, that is what classically most people on a school committee would say is hopping around from job to job. And yet he indicates that that's something that concerns him when he hires people. So I'd be concerned that after 2 years, he would hop to another superintendency once he gets some experience here. So as I said, he may turn out to be a great superintendent. He certainly seems honest and driven and cares about kids. I just feel that we have, quite frankly, 3 better choices.
Anyone else? I will take Carla, you're unable to participate. And that was after discussion with Russell Dupre. I wasn't going to offer comments, but I again, let me reiterate that I believe we have the best 4 candidates out of the whole process on the table at this time. I believe any one of those candidates could walk in the door tomorrow and take over and move the district forward. I have faith in the 4 finalists that we picked. They're finalists for a reason. I think my concern is that, and the most input that I've heard from parents over the past 3-4 months isn't candidate based, and it's not specific to any one candidate, but parents and community members, primarily parents, staff members, et cetera, are sick and tired of the labels that our kids get and continuous push without relief. Kids across the state are data, they're numbers. They're not students per se anymore. And let me just give credit to what credit's due. I personally think no matter who comes into the top spot, our administrative team certainly has the experience in what we need to continue the work in this district, as well as our teachers, our staff, our support staff, everybody. It's not one person that's made change in this district, it's a whole bunch. And I think that everybody needs to start getting credit for the work that they've done. So again, moving forward, I have spent umpteen hours, et cetera, reviewing resumes from start to finish until, today as well. Again, any of our 4 finalists could come in. I do not think that there's a learning curve for any of them. I do have concerns about, I guess, not specific to, I don't want to criticize a candidate per se, but I would offer the opinion that I'm not convinced that a person from a city school district is what this district needs. Our district, regional school district systems are umpteenly, remotely different than a municipal school district. Quite frankly, there's a huge financial staff in a city that does budgets and does financial and school facility maintenance, management, et cetera. That's all done by city facility staff. So I don't think that anybody, rises to the occasion in my mind, except a candidate like Matt Erhenworth. And I know that I would usually not vote on a particular candidate during this process unless there was a reason to. Tonight, I do feel that there's a reason to, because I think personally that gentleman is the most rounded candidate that we can put forth that has all the regional school district experience we need, can do the facilities work and get a good grasp on our business work. It's much more than just, being worried about level 4. Quite frankly, nobody in this district did anything to bring our children to level 4. That is the absolute fault of the DESE. When we built ACES, we asked, myself and Tony Polito asked for no status for that school for 1 year. And instead they turned around and gave ACES, the brand new school building, the designation of level 4 that was tagged to Riverbend/Sanders Street. So it's been, a constant battle with the DESE. Again, all of our 4 candidates here tonight could do the job. But I do like the fact that, and don't forget we have a person who we gave opportunity to as an assistant superintendent who never served as a superintendent. So I don't think the learning curve is there. And again, whatever my role as chair, your role as the school committee is to support whoever is put forth as the candidate that gets the most votes. And that's what I intend to do. And I know that there'll be angst in some circles, and, it is what it is. We'll make 50% of the people unhappy, and the other 50% will be even unhappier. So, it is what it is. It's the nature of the beast. So again, there is a motion on the floor. If everybody else, if there's any other comments, that's great. If not, I'll call for a vote. And all those, please keep your hand up because I'm also functioning as secretary. So all those in favor of Matthew Erhenworth, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He has successfully received the 7 votes. I, as chair, will cast the 8th. Any opposition?
I'd like to move that we nominate him unanimously.
Okay. You take that as a friendly amendment? Okay. So the vote will be 9 in favor of those of us unanimous to offer Matthew Erhenworth, the Assistant Superintendent of Blackstone Millville, the position of Superintendent of Schools pending successful contract negotiations. Okay. Thank you very much. Is there any other further business to come before the board this evening? Seeing none. Nancy?
I make a motion that we adjourn. Wait, sorry.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I can do that. So just hang tight. I'll be right back. TV timeout.
Excuse me.
Yep.
Do you need a new vote on making that
No,
unanimous?
he accepted it as an amendment.
Okay.
I think I only have the I did just speak with Mr. Erhenworth, and he wholeheartedly thanks the committee, and he wholeheartedly thanks the district, and he's looking forward to come here to work pending successful contract negotiations. So he did accept the position. So Nancy, try that again.
I can't unmute. I would still like to adjourn, please.
Is there a second?
I'll
Second.
second.
Seeing no discussion, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody, for your work and
Thank
being
you,
here
Lee.
tonight.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you.